This is our first meeting to develop a contract for the upcoming school year. We have 10 team members and a facilitator, Stephanie Haynes, from the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services. She has served as our facilitator for the past 4 or 5 years, I think.
3 or 4, yeah.
And she is rejoining us, and I did want to go around the table and just have everybody do introductions so we know who everybody is. I am Rachel England, and I'm the general counsel for the district. This is my 5th year with Shawnee Mission School District.
Christy Cornell, and I am principal at Rushton Elementary.
I am Nolan Lewis. I teach kindergarten at Mill Creek Elementary.
Casey Orlick, Special Education at West.
Christy Darby, Director of Elementary Services, taught here in the district for 7 years and admin for 10.
And is it Chrissy or Christy?
Christy.
Okay, thanks.
Amber Pagan, I'm a pre-K teacher at Neiman and the NEA Shawnee Mission Vice President.
I'm Mike Schumacher. I'm the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources mainly. And this is my 9th year in the district. I think it's 5 years on negotiations? 5 years.
Chris Case, principal at Hawker Grove Middle School, and this is year 1 for me.
John Dirks, math teacher at Indian Woods Middle School.
Wendy Griffin, 3rd grade teacher at Rushton Elementary School.
Okay, so I see a couple new faces. Good to see you folks here. I want to just, because we have new people on the team, just real briefly share my role with you all. When I started with you, I guess it has been maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I really facilitated you on each issue from beginning to end. Really had to sort of draw you through the process. But over the past few years, you have started to do pretty good on self-facilitation, meaning you sort of know this 5-step IBB process. You create your own agenda before we even get here. And my role here is really to help keep you on track, to make some sort of third-party objective observations, perhaps at some point in the process of issue statements that may be helpful to you. And while you're doing your own note-taking over the past few years, I will say sometimes being the note-taker takes you away from the conversation. If you want me to jump in and note-take on any issue statement, just ask me to, and I'll screen share and take it over for you so you can be fully engaged in the conversation instead of having to note-take. So that's just a little bit about my role here. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And if not, I'll kick it back to Rachel.
So I think it makes sense just to kind of review our agenda, make sure that everybody is still okay with it. I will add, we don't do anything like formal like you see in a board meeting, like we don't make motions, we don't approve. And and I am not the president of these meetings, so anyone can, feel free to take the reins or lead any discussion. So Amber and I worked together to put together an outline of an agenda for today. For the first hour, we wanted to go ahead and ask Stephanie just to review high level the IBB negotiation method so that when she uses certain words and phrases, we all know what she's talking about and we all understand. It's a little bit different than traditional negotiations. And so if you don't know how traditional negotiations work, I think that's great because then you're starting off at a clean slate and you can just learn how we do things in Shawnee Mission. We do try and build in breaks, so we will take a break after that. And then the next thing is that each side will introduce issue statements. That's largely just reading them, maybe giving any explanation, but just reading our issue statements and introducing the topics that each side wants to talk about this year. Do another quick break. And then from there on out, every single year, the district has noticed an issue about just the process we want to use, scheduling. And so we'll go ahead and review that, see if we want to do something similar to what we've done in previous years in terms of a process and agreed meeting norms. I will say the first 1 or 2 years we did this, that seemed like an absolute necessity for the team to work cooperatively. It may seem now kind of like overkill, but I do think it's good because every once in a while we do like go back to them, but it also kind of sets the tone, which is nice. And we do want to go ahead and get all of our meetings scheduled because everybody in this room has a busy work and personal schedule, and I know Stephanie has some limited availability, so we'll try and get all of our meetings on the calendar so everybody can plan their lives around that.
Okay.
Does that sound good to everyone?
Okay, if I could just screen share, I've just got 5 quick screens that I want to share while I just give the quick overview of IBB, or interest-based bargaining, or sometimes called collaborative bargaining. I want to kind of just do a little compare and contrast, just to remind folks, in a traditional bargaining setting, it's generally not so collaborative. It tends to become a little more adversarial. In years past, you all have experienced traditional bargaining and kind of moved in this direction in order to have better outcomes, quite frankly. But in traditional bargaining, if you see the arrow that says traditional, it points to sort of, it's based on power and rights, right? Do we have a right to not bargain about that? Or do we have the power to make the other side do that? Based on separate wants and needs. There may be some overlap, but usually the way traditional bargaining is set up, it really comes down to push-pull, right? Give this for that. And generally, it doesn't really get to the root of the issues that either side wants to address in negotiations, because it is so based on a compromise, based on really rights and power. A collaborative bargaining or interest-based bargaining, the core difference is you come together from the get-go to identify problems together, unpack the problems, determine what common interest, why both sides should be invested in solving the problem or the issue, and then you work together to come to a solution instead of bringing separate solutions to the table to argue over. So that's really sort of interest-based bargaining in a nutshell. In traditional, your constituents usually see you sitting across the table with one spokesperson, but in collaborative bargaining, you sort of just come take a seat and everybody sort of leans in with their opinion, their thoughts, and their ideas. So it's much more even-based versus hierarchical. So basically, in a nutshell, instead of you all meeting separately and then bringing proposals to defend and argue about, instead you bring issues to unpack and solve together. So it's pretty much a 5-step process. I'll share that screen really quickly. Don't expect to memorize this if you're not on the team, although this team has had training on this. The first thing you guys will do is you'll bring whatever issue you want to work on forward. Each side will have maybe 6 to a dozen issues every year. You'll take that one issue and you'll start identifying everything about it you can share. Why it's a problem, what's broken about it, how it used to work, and then why you need to solve it together. What are your interests? What are your common interests to work on this problem together? And then the third step is you'll start brainstorming solutions together. So you don't come with a solution, you come up with solutions together after you've unpacked the problem. And then you'll evaluate the possible solutions that this team comes up with, which is the one that most addresses our issue, and which one's feasible, affordable, manageable, and executable. And then you'll determine, do you have consensus on how you want to solve that particular issue? And consensus is not a majority vote here. It's when everyone on the team feels as though you've come up with the best possible solution for the issue or problem. And so if you're watching online, you'll see at times we'll do thumbs around the room here, and that's when you kind of finish the process on one issue, and we're going to look to see if everybody's good to go on it. So that's really the overview of IBB that I had. Unless there's anything anybody else wants to weigh in and share that you may have common questions about, go ahead and provide additional explanation. Okay. All righty. I can stop screen sharing. Thank you.
So we're kind of early, and I think that that's great. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think just from my past experience, again, for the new people, we will have Stephanie lead us through that process. So she'll introduce and she'll kind of direct us on what to do. We've sort of talked about in the past that, you have to, in this setting, get over that fear factor of, am I going to say something that is not a good idea, or maybe a teammate wouldn't agree with, or is just crazy out there. There's a lot of room for that in this setting. And I think that it's okay to share things that maybe from your personal experience or maybe viewed as friendly to the other side. The goal is to get to the best place that we can get to. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that over the course of 4 or 5 years that we've done this, I think it's important for us to view each other as one team, and that we're not adversarial, we're not trying to get one thing over on the other. And it's okay for me to disagree with Rachel or for Chris to disagree with me. That's where we get to a solution that's best for the district. So I think that's really important. I think it's good to challenge each other, to remind ourselves of the process. Like sometimes inevitably we go straight to a solution and to check ourselves and to get us back to those interests. I remember that being a part of our process in the past. And then just a part of process for those newbies, it's okay, this is okay, you're okay with this. And then that's, I love it, and then that's a negative. So that was something that I need to be reminded of as well.
Both really good reminders, and I want to say that even though this team will work hard on solutions, if you're still not convinced it's the best solution, it's okay if you're the only one that is here. Oftentimes, it's because you have a sense there's something the team is missing, so you're going to ask us all to go back and tell us, what is this not doing? Is it not solving the problem? Is it harming an interest? Is it not feasible? Is it not affordable and manageable? Right? You may feel like you're the only person that is saying, well, why can't they see this isn't the right answer? Right? Well, generally, we're going to treat that as a strength of the team. If you think we're not there, you're challenging everyone else to, let's keep working, we can do better. But if you are here, we're going to ask you the whys, right? What are we missing? So it is okay to be here. That's not a negative. But be prepared to sort of push and share with everyone why you're here so we can do better. And really, it's about transparency. When we do step 2, which is, so what are our interests on solving this problem? Why do we need to solve it? There is no bad or wrong interest other than a hidden interest. So if you're thinking it, please say it. And then while the step is linear, those 5 steps we go through sort of in order. Sometimes you do tend to want to jump, and I'll pull you back, you'll pull each other back. But naturally, there is going to be a little bit of an up and down on those 5 steps, just as long as we try to stay sort of focused on the step we're on.
In the past, we've had agreements or norms, right? Norms for the group. Did we do that last year, or did we just kind of adopt the ones from, I wonder if we should.
Is that part, I know Rachel, you were talking earlier about your issue statement number 1, is that part of that? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and introduce that. And there are some things, as much as, we absolutely can't jump to the end of the process, I think there are sometimes, particularly on very repetitive issues, that if everybody's completely comfortable and we know what we're talking about and we've developed a good solution before, like we have on that one, sometimes those go quicker, but we do want to go through it and make sure we're still in agreement and still on the same page. That gets to what's kind of a tricky part about IBB, and the reason why the district raises this as an issue every year is because IBB does not exactly align with the Kansas Professional Negotiations Act in a couple different ways. One being that under the act, we do notice letters, so we still do those even though they're not required by the act. And everyone in here has done or should have done some level of training on the act and reviewed the act, and so in that training, you would have seen that, you have to do these issue statements where you notice 3 terms in the P&A that you'd like to negotiate that year, plus compensation in hours and amounts of work. And IBB is a little more freewheeling, I guess I would say, on some of those things. And the reason why we adopt sort of a procedure and norms is because I, from the district side and in representing our Board of Education, want to make sure that we're not sliding into, not fulfilling those requirements on one side, or that we aren't protecting the rights afforded to either party under that act. And so That's just a way of documenting it that I think helps me sleep at night, to know that we're mindful of that act and its requirements. Really, the only time that it ever becomes a concern is if we don't reach an agreement, which everyone in this room hopes that never happens. But if we do get to a point where it's fall and we don't have an agreement and we reach impasse, then it becomes important to ensure that we follow the act. So that'll be, you'll see that when we go through that issue statement.
In terms of TAs, you all tend to keep a TA folder. When you reach a TA, are you all printing and signing off on them, or they just get moved to the TA folder? What is your practice on that, just as a reminder?
So historically, Jay Sharbutt did everything, and I just signed it with my finger, and then he left the team last year, and we hobbled along. So that's what we'll do this year, is try and be good to the environment and do things on PDFs, and it won't be as technologically advanced because I have no idea how to do a signature on an iPad. I guess I could learn a new trick. But we just have done them electronically and saved them in our shared folder.
As long as everyone's on the same page with it and you can track it, I think that's fine.
In our TAs, that acronym refers to a tentative agreement, and those are for agreed upon revisions or changes or additions to the P&A language. We've also done something called collective commitments, or CCs, and those are things that do not change or alter the terms in the P&A, but are things that we've made a group agreement to do going forward or for that upcoming school year. So we use two different things, and really the purpose of the CE is just to have it memorialized, but also then to communicate out with the Shawnee Mission community, namely our professional employees and our administrators and our board, about this is what we've agreed to do, and it's memorialized here in case we need to go back and look at it.
And the NEA will vote it, and then the board eventually approves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and last year we were able to do that prior to the last contract day. I don't know if we'll be able to do it. We tried. I mean, we want to be efficient with our time. You will see that in one of our issue statements. We want to be efficient with our time, but we also don't want to put pressure on this team, particularly when it comes to negotiating compensation if we don't have reliable numbers or information yet from the state, where our CFO, Russ, is like, I can't guarantee these. This is my best guess. But last year he had solid numbers. I think it's sounding like he will this year as well. So that's a possibility, I would say. Not out of the realm that we can get this done before the last contract day. It also becomes sort of a scheduling issue once we hit the summer, because for all of us who work in education, that is our time to take vacation. And so we have 10 people plus a facilitator. It hits the end of May, beginning of June, and suddenly we cannot find a meeting date where we can get a majority of the people here. So, okay.
All right, and just in terms of today, do we want to just take breaks as needed, or did you have set breaks? Do people need a meal time, or are we just doing breaks? Whatever works for folks.
Well, the next item on our agenda was reviewing issue statements. Do we want to take a break before we do that, or just plow through and do it and then take a break?
I say let's plow through. We've only been going for 20
minutes. It doesn't seem like they're lengthy on either side.
No.
So we can go ahead and review issue statements and then maybe take a break.
Just breaks as needed then.
Comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and it does not matter to me who goes first. I don't know if you have a preference. Thank you. And you already have this in the...
Okay, and I think you all have copies of all ours. Yes? Okay. Issue statement number 1 for NEA Shawnee Mission is the compensation issue. The issue statement we have is, how do we ensure that our certified staff are adequately compensated for their workload? How do we reward teachers for their longevity and dedication to the district? How do we make sure the supplemental salary schedule is competitive across all levels and districts?
Do you see any of this as being a pre-compensation discussion, or would this all be? Sorry, I gotta remember to turn on my mic. My question was, do you see any of this as being pre-May discussion or all post-May discussion?
I think the longevity and the dedication, that question might be a
Okay.
pre-made discussion. Supplemental salary schedule, I know we had a subcommittee last year. Was it last year or was it the year before? That, yeah, reworked the supplemental salary schedule, seeing if there might be any changes with any movements between classes on the supplemental salary schedule as well.
Is that, and something we didn't review when we talked about process, is that sometimes when we have meatier issues, we refer those to like basically a working committee that doesn't have to be as formal and can just sit down and look through things and work. Is that something that you think we should refer to a subcommittee, or is it
Well, I know
not?
we have one subcommittee still meeting. The supplemental, we haven't met since last year. I don't know if it would be worth, getting that group together just for a check-in, maybe.
Yeah, it
And
might
with
be.
with the longevity discussion, would that merit a work group or a subcommittee? Have you thought through that, or do we just need to process it?
I think that can probably be brought to this group, at least at first. And then if we feel like it's a meatier issue, sound like a meteor, a meatier issue, then we can divide that out into a subgroup. But I don't see that as being something we need to send to a subgroup.
So that is issue statement number 1.
Pretty straightforward.
This is the only one I'd like to pause and compare it to the district's compensation one, just because there's always going to be there's always going to be two, and I just want to see how similar or different they may look.
Let me upload ours to the,
And then we can go on and go through the whole NEA package.
And we made a folder just for issue statements.
perfect, thank you. And everyone should have access to this, so this is not any one individual's folder, it's ours as a group, so. Okay, I'm gonna upload ours now. So ours, okay, you should be able to pull it up. It's a PDF, and I can put the Google Doc version in there too if we need to. It's our very last issue statement, SMSD.5. It reads the same as our prior year issue statement has on all compensation issues, to include the salary schedule and the supplemental schedule. Oh, yeah. Let me shut down my email here. Okay.
What is your statement?
So we reference the portion of the Kansas Professional Negotiation Act that talks about what compensation means for purposes of the act. And it includes the salary schedule, both step and column movement, stipends, supplemental pay schedule. And again, our interests are outlined there.
The reason I wanted to sort of compare is because I feel like this looks a little different than last year. And I wouldn't necessarily change it. I'm just going to make an observation, and I don't think it's going to matter. I think you guys will still sort of work these together. But I think that when you have how do we reward teachers for longevity and dedication, I think recognizing longevity and dedication is an interest.
Mm-hmm.
versus a solution. So just to be clear, your first line and your, how do we supplement do the supplementals, those are really adequate issue statements. And you could still put longevity and commitment or dedication under interest to solve for that, right? Because when we solve, we try to meet most of the interests without harming any.
And we did not specifically notice longevity as an issue, but it is a component of compensation under the P&A. And I don't know, does anyone off the top of their head know the amount in the year?
I know that at 25, you get
25.
$250. Sorry. Mhm. Yep, that's where it starts. It doesn't look better after that.
But yeah, certainly something that, it's actually a schedule, right, at the very end of the P&A, so. I did have an issue on here that's a very small sub-issue, but just something I wanted to talk about with this group because it came up this summer, and Jill Johnson and I had to work through it because we hadn't in a while had a fully ratified P&A prior to the completion of summer school. And again, you're going to find when I talk, there's lots of weaknesses in terms of like actual understanding of how things work because I don't, you know, I'm sort of in a silo in my position on some things, but we had an issue about what was the hourly rate for summer school, given that the P&A was already ratified, and luckily Russ Knapp, our CFO, had a lot of historical information about how that had always been paid, but I do think it's something that could be helpful to clarify, because whenever we have a question like that come up, it's great when, you know, both sides can come together and just agree how we're going to do it. It's better if the P&A is just abundantly clear and says what's going to happen. So,
I know we talked a little bit about that during our subcommittee on, I'm losing words. Not PLC, supplemental pay. Thank you. I could not think of the word supplemental. We did talk about that some during our discussions and that supplemental. I don't know if that's something we want to send to that committee or if we just discuss that at this table as well.
did Russ serve on that committee last time? Because I know that I would want his input on that because he was like, I think that there's some technical processing issues to that he would want to have input on. So just, it may entirely be appropriate for that. I think he just had some like, wait a second, we would have to figure out if we can even do that type things. So, and it may not be that he needs to be on the committee, he just needs to provide the information, but.
For the sake of our audience, the bonus is 250 up to 500, and it starts at 25 years of employment, and then maxes at 45 years of employment.
It's on page 63.
And I'm guessing it hasn't been touched for a long time.
You can go back for a minute. You can look at them. It's there.
Okay, do you want me to get off screen, Miriam, so we can go back to? I kicked myself off.
Wait for Wendy to get that pulled up.
There we go.
There we go. All right. NEA, issue state number 2. Issue type, we're looking at repair and economic on this one. Looking at sick/personal leave days as well as bereavement leave. And our issue statement, do the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of our professional employees, and are they competitive with the surrounding districts?
Do you have any focus? I know, I mean, is it just as to the number of temporary leave days and bereavement days, or is it the reasons?
Yes.
All
both.
To the
all
both.
of, all
Yeah,
of the
all
above.
of the above.
Okay, yes.
It
Yes.
sounds really exploratory. It doesn't sound like you want to solve a problem, it sounds like you want to explore it. Do the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of professional employees? And interest is make it competitive, right? But is it more like how do we ensure the provisions meet the needs instead of do they? Like, is this really truly just exploratory?
Not necessarily. Looking more into, I'm trying to think of how I want to word this correctly. Making sure we're not penalized with the current policy.
Are you wanting to make sure so how do we ensure is better than does it? Right, you're just going to answer a question here, yes or no?
That's fine, yep.
In your exploratory way you've worded it versus actually working a problem that you think exists.
Okay.
Okay.
You'd have to do how do we to really
Absolutely.
work the problem, if that makes sense. How
So
do we
how do we
ensure?
ensure the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of our professional employees?
Right, and then one of your interests would be competitiveness.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Yep.
I can't spell today.
And again, just going back to IBB process for our new team members, our facilitator will regularly do this for both sides. So she will
It's true.
critique and make sure that our issue statements fit within IBB process and steer us.
Ready for 3? Okay. 3 is a repair. It's issue number 3 is plan time and daily schedule. How do we ensure staff have a daily schedule that allows them to plan, time to plan, modify lessons, contact parents, collaborate with colleagues, et cetera, to successfully meet the needs of all students?
As far as the issue statement, it's structured fine. I don't know if you guys have any other questions at this point.
4.
Do you,
Moving on to 4.
I have a point of clarification. We've discussed something like this in the past, right? And is it, or could it be tied to professional learning communities?
Yes.
Okay.
It absolutely could.
Okay, all right.
Number 4.
Okay, so this is concerning the professional year. The issue statement would be, how can we create a calendar that is competitive with other districts?
And is this similar to past years where we've had someone from the association sort of sit down with the administrators to create the calendar and check and make sure that the provisions are met and the provisions of the P&A are met and that there's no glaring issues or conflicts? Okay.
I'm a little the word competitive. Is that how do we ensure a calendar that recruits and retains and honors the agreement? Or, I mean, because that's what behind competitive is? We'll have to unpack that further, but, because this would be just you're solely solving for competitiveness.
I think retain and recruit. We definitely want to get people to come to our district based off of our calendar and not go other places.
Compared to other districts' calendars, and then to make sure that ours is up to date.
Yes.
So how do you create an appropriate calendar, appropriate meaning up to date, in line with the contract and retains and recruits. So an appropriate calendar that retains and recruits. One interest would be in compliance with the contract, another one would be competitive, and I'm sure you'd have interest around student needs. So I would say that's how do we create a calendar that retains and recruits? If that's okay, an okay adjustment, I'd recommend.
Yeah, that's okay.
We may be getting the cart before the horse, or I may be. So number of workdays or, and/or like staff workdays or professional learning days, is that part of it, or?
Talking about conferences, like having a full-day conference, talking about,
Potential days after Halloween.
yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say timing of professional development.
Not
is
that
a
we have an
phrase.
idea of any of that, but anyway.
Maybe moving the flex days to the Friday after conferences.
Okay. That helps me.
That's helpful. And how we've handled that before, there's this push and pull, because in the Negotiations Act, the calendar is expressly something that is reserved for Board of Education discretion. However, we know that input from our teachers is very, very helpful and is needed. And frankly, if we don't, then sometimes errors get made because it is shockingly complex to put together. And so we do seek and want that input. And I think we pretty much treat it as a discussion item every single year that usually I think someone will work directly with Dr. Dennis and kind of come back and report to this team where we're at. It's kind of how we've done it. Okay.
All right. And I believe it's our last issue statement this year. It would be about paperwork days, and we're looking to just remodel this because it's technically in one of our MOUs. How do we assist SPED teachers, ELL teachers, social workers, nurses, those types of roles with getting their paperwork completed for required documents?
Simple statement, but I'm sure it'll be hard to solve.
It's a lot. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
So this, again, is similar to what we talked about in the past with Sherry bringing
Yes.
in information? Okay.
For context, right now, special education teachers, is it four?
Four. We
Four
get
paperwork
four
days a year, but the others listed in there do not.
So I know we want to hear from the district in terms of issue statements. Then we can go back and say which ones are tightly related and which ones are due. Okay.
All right, I will go ahead and share my screen again. What's really nice this year is that randomly and without any conferring, we have the same number of issue statements, which makes scheduling easier because it's not like a, exact equal time issue, but we do try and generally kind of take turns going through issues and not have, it feel like any one side has dominated the time that we have. Okay. Ours are very similar to the associations. A lot of ours are not new, I would say. They're things that we have worked on before and talked about as a team that maybe just need some refinement or revisiting or rediscussion. So nothing surprising, nothing new. There have been some substantive terms in the P&A that on both sides we've asked for like a shift from, and I don't think we're gonna have anything quite like that this year. The first issue statement is one that we've seen before. I sort of already reviewed how the Negotiations Act doesn't exactly align with IBB, and so we would like to collaborate and solve on how we can make sure that we have a process that recognizes the requirements of that act, but also honors the IBB process. Something that we talked about last year was that, at least from the district side, we are feeling like we're devoting a large number of hours every single spring semester to negotiating topics. Amber and I had sort of talked in the background about that and about this year. Now that we've gotten to this point and reviewed issue statements, I think we are going to not have a problem coming up with a manageable and reasonable schedule that doesn't overwhelm us and make us feel like we can't meet our professional duties. But we talked last year about the possibility of having a multi-year P&A on terms and conditions only, and the district would like to revisit that again this year and talk about the possibility of having like stability periods where we're not messing with the terms and conditions of the P&A. That's the only modification of this issue statement from previous years, is to talk about that. The Negotiations Act sets a time frame of 1 to 3 years for P&As, and we've sort of like repeatedly done 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. So we'd like to at least talk about the possibility of having a longer term.
So you've sort of bullet pointed one idea,
Yes.
which really should go under ideas.
Yes.
So your how do we statement, I hear it as how do we better align the Professional Negotiation Act and the IBB process, and I'm hearing interests such as compliance and efficiency.
Yep.
Okay. And you could dig deeper when we
Yep.
go focus.
Our second issue statement, and this is something that we talked about doing last year, so we wanted to make sure that we actually did it this year. We made a revision to our late resignation provision. Late resignation refers to a professional employee giving notice of their resignation after the statutory date, which falls in late May or early June every year. And we compared our provision with other neighboring districts. Ours was more permissive in allowing late resignations to the extent that it allowed liquidated damages to be released from the contract. We've since, for this school year, had our provision read that liquidated damages would be accepted over the summer, but once you had your first contract day, we needed to be able to find a suitable replacement. So we wanted to, review the data from this year to see what our numbers are compared to previous years. And then there's another focus in here which has to do with a new exception that we built in. That exception was for professional employees who, because of a serious medical condition, certify that they submit a certification and it's approved by HR that they need 12 continuous weeks of FML due to their own serious medical condition or another immediate family member, serious medical condition. And that if they did that and they got partially down the road with FML and realized that it wasn't going to be possible for them to come back, and rather than work with the district on an accommodation, they just want to resign from their contract, that we would allow that. There's been, we've seen at least 2 circumstances of potential abuse of that provision or misinterpretation of that provision. So we want to talk about that to see if maybe we need to revise or repair the language to make sure it only serves its intended purpose and isn't subject to abuse. I say that in a self-critical way because I drafted it. So it's not critical of anyone else. I was the author of that language, and so if it needs to be revised to make sure that it's really, really clear on what it can be used for, that we wanted to look at that.
That sounds to me like I see you're missing sort of a how do we statement.
Oh, yes.
So is it how do we review the impact of late resignation changes from last year to ensure it's meeting our interest? And your
Yes.
interest you identified last year, it wouldn't hurt to have those this year.
Yes.
So just saying, did what we do meet our interest?
Yes.
And
And then
if-
how do we prevent basically abuse of the exceptions to the late resignation provision?
Which may be a separate but highly related issue statement. How do we prevent abuse of late resignation policy?
Yes. And I will, don't let me forget, something that I believe Jill and I talked about during the school year was we have developed a 1 or 2 page introduction to the P&A or high-level overview of the P&A that Human Resources puts with the new hire packet. so that if you are new to the district or you're a new teacher, it's sort of like, here's the P&A in a nutshell. It's not the nitty gritty, but here's to familiarize yourself with it. Actually, it's probably a great tool if you're a new administrator to our district as well. But reviewing that would be another interest of ours. Is there something that we need to put in there to make really clear you're signing a contract and you're committing to work for 1 year? Just something else to think about is I don't want to forget that when we get to that issue.
I made a note that, you're ahead of the process, but one possible idea, ensure educator understanding of policy.
Yes.
This may, what we're still on to, and this may be more appropriate when we're actually discussing that issue statement. I just want to make sure when we're discussing that the data's there. To make sure when possible to have the reason for resignations in that data as well would be beneficial.
Yep.
Yep,
I believe we track that.
we do.
Perfect.
And then our third issue statement aligns with the association's issue statement 3. So this, again, is not new. It's something we've been working on. This will be our 3rd year to come up with what's clearly not going to be perfect, but is going to bubble to the top as our best solution to providing that guarded time at the elementary level for PLCs. And I know a subcommittee has been meeting. I don't know who is on there, and I don't know how close you are.
Yeah, not to jinx us, but really, so maybe I won't say anything. No, I think we're all proud of the work we've been doing, and we're making progress. I guess I'll just leave it at that. We're making progress.
I would agree. Progress, we're making a lot of progress.
Yeah.
Is the issue statement, how do we ensure guarded PLC time for elementary, and it's going to start with a report back from a subcommittee?
I think that's all
Yeah.
correct.
Yep.
Our 4th issue is, again, not new, and probably would be interesting to kind of group with longevity, maybe as like a pre-discussion to compensation when we're scheduling it out. But again, hearing what we're hearing about capers and where it may or may not go, we would like, the board would like again to introduce and talk about the idea of the district making some sort of contribution to an individual retirement plan for teachers so that we ensure that our Shawnee Mission teachers have a plan in addition to their capers pension. It's anyone's guess as to where that system goes. But if it continues to go in the direction it's been going and we're looking at capers for it, it's going to be an absolute necessity from a personal financial planning standpoint for our teachers to have an additional retirement plan. So looking for some protection there.
Is that how do we ensure an adequate retirement plan for SMSD teachers?
And there's only so much we can do as a district because of that caper system, but yeah, that we want to make sure that our teachers are prepared for retirement and can retire on time because it's hard to get to those 25, 35, 45 years.
Yeah.
And then we've already reviewed our issue statement 5. And I don't foresee, the only thing we might need to pull out is just clarifying that hourly rate for summer school to make sure that that issue doesn't come up again and that everybody, I don't want anyone to ever have a question about how much they're going to be paid. I want it to be pretty clear in our P&A. And that's it. So we could probably, since it's 1:50, go ahead and do a 10 and 15-minute break. And then, I don't know what makes more sense. If we just go ahead and schedule meetings when we get back and then go to our issue statement? Yeah. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, we are back, having concluded a review of each side's issue statements and doing a little bit of matching them up. Did want to make a note of clarification. Amber visited me over the break and clarified that their issue statement on the calendar may touch on certain things and certain guarantees that are outlined under the professional negotiated agreement. And so what I need to correct is to the extent that those are topics that are discussed or raised as part of their issue statements, those are mandatorily negotiable items because they already appear in the P&A in their P&A language. So I know we have certain days that are outlined in there that says we will have these, and to the extent they're guaranteed in the P&A, that is something that's mandatorily negotiable. Other components of the calendar are not, but anything that's in the P&A would be. So wanted to make that clarification for anybody who's listening. In terms of what's next on our agenda, Amber and I agreed that this year we would start as we have in past years, just checking off the district's the first issue statement about the process that we are going to use. Again, it may be one that is not a good example of how to go through the full process, because we've gone through the full process on this 3 times or 4 times before. But we do have new members to this team, and we may have some input or changes on it. And actually, now that I'm saying that, did we want to calendar our meetings before we jump into that? Okay, so we will calendar our meetings, then we'll go through that issue statement and check that off. And we do want to go ahead and complete our chart of prioritizing the issues. And then during the break, Stephanie and Amber and I talked about maybe some additional components of IBB training that she could do for us at the end of the meeting. And so, or after the meeting, I should say. So we will conclude our meeting when we are done with the formal negotiations, and then use our remaining time to kind of go through those training pieces that are just for the team on things like sources of conflict and personality differences.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
It's more the relational side of IBB, I guess, that you would normally get in a full formal training.
Can I throw out their consideration of maybe attacking another issue statement or starting on an issue statement if we have time, since we have it,
Yeah.
we have time blocked off until 5?
Yeah.
Sure.
If we get that far, let's do it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and then I would also say that I know you're going to jump into number 1, which is really better align the Professional Negotiation Act with the IBB process. But at some point, for folks that are new on the team, at some point, did you 5-step that? And does it hurt to just review those notes with the new team members? And I don't know who has them. I don't think I do.
If we can find them.
Right, right.
I think somewhere, former team member Lindsay Ashton created notes on that, and we can look and see if we have those.
I mean, if you have something that's clearly the 5 steps.
Yeah.
Right, because while jumping into it now, 3 sessions later, 3 contract cycles later, isn't going to feel like IBB, but it'll let the new folks know how you got here.
Yep.
On that issue.
It was at least the year before, maybe even the year before that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
I'm looking in the folders right now for anything, but I'm not even sure where it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I don't know how good a notes Lindsay did take, and if they're on the body of an issue statement or if they were in a Word doc. I don't think I took notes on that.
There's a collective commitment page, what the spreadsheet shows. Do we have a folder for that somewhere? Collective commitment regarding negotiations process.
If not, it's not a huge deal. But if you have it, it's just a good learning tool. If you did 5-step it.
I can share it.
Do we want to do dates first?
Yeah. So what I need everyone to do is to get out all your calendars that you may have in your life. So your work calendar, your personal calendar, your calendar your partner keeps you to, whatever it is, like, get it out. We obviously try to respect everybody's schedules and keep the meetings to a reasonable length. I'm personally in the camp that when meetings go too long, they completely stop being productive just due to sheer exhaustion. It is not a requirement that we have all 10 people here, but it is definitely ideal and preferable that we do. And certainly, I think the lead negotiator for both sides needs to be present, and certainly our facilitator as well. So,
Are you thinking that we'll do like a short one and then a long day one again? Or are you wanting to do all half days maybe and then?
so I think we should talk about that. I will tell you that for my preference, those long meetings are really hard and are maybe should be reserved if we actually have like something we think like is a very meaty issue that is going to take a lot of time. We don't want to divide it up into chunks. But I think that those meetings are hard, and I think we reach a limited amount of getting work done after about 2 hours.
Does the association, do you guys have any concerns about meeting during the day, subs, or would you, what are your thoughts there?
For PLC and staff meeting purposes, I would like to avoid Tuesdays as much
Sure.
as possible.
Okay.
Let's talk about time of day, too.
Yep.
Because Amber pointed out to me earlier, obviously, and this is an issue that's been raised in negotiations, strain on our sub pool is an issue. I also understand that having a sub in your classroom, it creates work for teachers as well, because you got to prepare sub plans. And so I don't know what we're thinking about time of day. Afternoon, we know that subs aren't an issue, but also it's the end of the day, and everybody's been working all day. And so I don't know if we want to look at potentially having morning meetings or some morning meetings, and what that creates for everybody else's. I probably have more flexibility in terms of time of day. So I don't know for you guys if you have an ideal time.
I mean, in an ideal world, I would say afternoons for me are a lot better, simply because my core instruction is primarily in the mornings.
Okay. What about you, Stephanie?
I'm assuming you're not going to look at dates till March, April, right? I mean, I don't have really anything left in February.
No.
But I'm pretty darn wide open in March and April at this point.
Okay.
So I'm good with either.
We have typically met twice a month starting in February. We have way more manageable of issue statements this year, and we always have the ability to start subcommittee work in February. So I think we should consider that if we're not going to start meeting until March. March may be easier from a conflict standpoint because it's further out, but we have spring break in there. So, do we want to just start looking at afternoons in March? And just go from there. And if we're not meeting until March, it may be difficult, again, just to do afternoons, but
Hour and a half, I think, is about as short as we want to go,
yeah.
right? And then maybe, say, 3 hours is the max? And that's about my bandwidth.
And when I say my February is full, if you're talking about just hour and a half meeting or 2 hour meeting, I may be able to fit something in February. So I don't want to totally foreclose on February for short meetings. But as far as like a chunk of 3 to 4 hour day, those are pretty much taken.
We could do some like a couple longer days.
Yeah. So I feel like we either look at trying to do 2 afternoons a month, February, March, April, till we get to compensation, or if we're not going to start till March, we're going to have to do an every other long one.
I don't think we should wait till March if we can find some time on Stephanie's calendar.
I agree.
Yeah.
So maybe share what you have in February first. since-
Okay.
When we're talking afternoons, are we talking like after
As
dismissal?
soon as the latest person can get here without
Okay.
driving unsafely.
Okay.
Which went, 3:15 is what we've typically done.
Okay.
I would need some coverage to get here by then, but I can work that out with my principal as well.
Is that stressful or is that doable? Okay.
On February 5th, I can do something like after 2, if you wanted to do like a 2 to 4, that gets in 2 hours, and then I'm out of town the rest of that week.
Let's just start writing down dates in February. So you have February 5th, 2 to 4. What else?
And then I can do the morning of Monday, the 12th, as long as I leave by about 11.
Rachel, I'm out the day of the 12th.
Okay. And
And I'm open the whole day of Wednesday, the 14th. I just gave to someone and they turned down. So whole day of Wednesday, the 14th.
As Valentine's Day party, elementary school, I cannot do that to a son.
Okay.
What about in the afternoon do you have the afternoon?
After school, that would be fine.
Afternoon
I
is okay on the
would-
14th.
I'm out. I'm out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Apparently people have a better
Then
life
Wednesday,
than I do.
Wednesday, the 21st is the same, as long as I can leave you all by 11 on Wednesday, the 21st. I have to be in St. Louis by 4:30, a school district that does evenings. So as long as I can leave you by 11 on Wednesday, the 21st, then I'm out of town the whole last week of February. So those are sort of the couple-hour availability for February. And then, like I said, March and April, you guys are getting first pick on.
There's a strategic planning steering committee that day.
On the 21st?
According to the.
Is that in the morning though, or the afternoon? So, okay, so for February, to recap, we are looking at February 5th, 2 to 4, the morning of February 12th, or the morning of February 21st.
Let me look back. Yes, correct on the 12th, and yes, correct on the 21st, as long as I leave by 11.
Okay, so first, process of elimination. Does anyone have any major conflicts with those three?
I think she said she couldn't be here the
Christine
12th.
I do on the 12th.
On the 12th?
I have a meeting on the 5th that might be tricky at this point to reschedule.
Okay.
We have a board meeting on the 12th.
I mean,
Yeah, and the 12th is the board meeting day, so we usually have cabinet and DLT in the morning. Okay, so we probably want to for sure grab the 21st. I appreciate an 8:30 start time so I can get my kiddos to school.
So 21st would be 8:30 to 11?
Do we just want to do do we want to do one long meeting? I mean, I don't know, again, this is where what does getting a sub look like? Is it like, can we just do a couple hours? Is it better to just do half day?
It's half or full. It's half or full.
So probably better to just do a half day on the 21st. See, you can talk about all these things and then practical, you can have your ideal schedule and then.
But she
Okay,
also
so
said it's their strategic planning. So is that going to be,
I will figure out a location if we
Okay.
can't get this room.
Okay, thanks.
Or I'll just have a battle with whoever has reserved it and we'll
Is
see
that
who
the,
wins.
is that the
but-
steering committee?
yeah.
That's probably going to be a conflict for some people on this team.
Oh. What time is that meeting?
I don't know. Is it all day? I don't know.
I sat down it before and it was 3 in a row all day.
Yeah, you're going to, yeah.
Does anyone have a conflict other than Dr. Schumacher? Yeah.
If we did morning, I could do that.
I don't know if I'm on it or not.
Okay, I think we should keep that. Because again, Amber and I really need to be at these, but it may be that we have one. And I know, and we'll review this when we go through the district's issue statement. I think we have a norm on there that says we try and have all 10 people here, but it's okay if someone's not, so. Okay, we'd like to go ahead and grab Stephanie Wednesday, February 21st from 8:30 a.m. to 11-ish. I will send out, take care of the calendaring, so I will send out a calendar invite to everybody who needs to be invited, including our communications folks. If you think of it, if you could turn off that little thing that says notify sender that I accepted, because after this day, I have like 400 emails of like everyone who's accepted. It's okay if you don't, I won't be offended, but I don't need notice that you've accepted. Okay, so now we need to look at March. I think ideally we're looking at 2 afternoons.
And March 12th just got taken during break, just in terms of an email I just got.
Well, we have spring break.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh,
we
do you?
have
Okay.
spring break the entire, what do you want to call that, second week of March.
Through the 17th.
So the week of the 4th?
Yeah.
Week of the 4th.
So why don't, can we look at, that's a bad week.
7th, I'm
Yeah, the 17th.
doing the video with our 6th grade boys, so I can't do that.
You don't want to miss that?
I could probably.
grade teachers don't want me to miss that.
And you guys typically don't do Fridays and Mondays, or does it matter?
Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I'm only available, in terms of that week, I'm only available Monday and Wednesday.
About Monday, morning,
What did you say?
Monday?
Or afternoon. I mean, I think we're trying to do afternoons
Okay,
for,
that's right, sorry.
Could Wednesday work for you both? Wednesday, the 6th in the afternoon work for folks? Or is that out for you, Mike?
I've got class, but
there's a mathletics competition that day, isn't there? Oh, cadre, okay. So what about Monday?
Yeah, what about? I'm open.
Okay,
Monday.
so Monday, March 4th, from 3:15 till 5:15?
Well, we have exec board that day,
Oh, yeah, 4:30. So, yeah.
so they have to be earlier. We have to be
Get
there by
subs.
4:30.
Do you have to drive to it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just, it's close, but we have to be done by like 4 or 4:15.
Do we want to try and look at the last 2 weeks and see if we can find some dates there? Let's try and look at the week starting the 18th and the week starting the 25th and see if we can find some dates there. Because like, I do think there's a point where a meeting's too short and we haven't really, we've all much ado about nothing, had Clayton set up all this stuff and then we
Well,
met for
could
an
1
hour.
to 4 on that Monday work?
Could what?
1 to 4?
1 to 4
Does
could.
that
We'd have to
you all
get-
getting subs after
Yeah,
lunch?
we'd have to get subs after lunch. Okay, let's hold that, Monday, March
Possible.
4th.
It'd be a long day for you guys. Okay.
Let's hold that, and then let's start looking at the week of the 18th.
What week are you looking at, y'all?
March 20th.
March 20th is on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so we for sure have March 20th, 3:15 to 5-ish, 5:15. Okay. And then what about, so we can either keep those two, or we could do 2 in a row. What about the week of the 25th?
Is that the week I'm out of town, though?
Oh, no.
Let me look.
March.
That week of the 25th, I'm in San Antonio.
You're in San Antonio, okay.
I could be virtual with you. It depends on what's on the agenda.
Longer on the 20th. Well, it's 3 hours. It'd be 3 hours.
What were the times on the 20th again?
3:15 to 5:15. Okay, so what I have for March is Monday, March 4th, from 1 to 4, which would be 3 hours. And then Wednesday, March 20th, 3:15 to 5:15, unless we want to consider doing virtual participation the last week of March. I do like.
Yeah,
doing
and it'd
that.
have to be afternoons.
Okay,
I'm fine.
okay. April.
The only thing I can't do so far in April is the afternoon of the 4th, or the afternoon of the 12th, or the 18th and 19th. Everything else is still amazingly open.
So if we meet the 20th, we should maybe look the 1st. Do we have school the 1st? That's the day after Easter?
I have,
Okay,
I'm giving Kansas assessments that week, so I prefer not.
to do that week? Okay, so let's look at the week of April 8th. Someone throw out some dates.
I have the open house the 11th, so.
Okay.
Also, it's morning.
We have strategic.
It's a Wednesday.
There's an strategic action team on the 10th at 4.
I have that on my calendar too. I don't know. I don't know anything about that, but it's there. Okay, what about Tuesday?
What about Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday the 9th in the afternoon?
I prefer
Oh,
not
yeah.
to because we're going to be doing class placements around that time.
I
and
have
it's
a,
that thing.
I have a PD I have to go to. Otherwise I have to make it up. I'd rather not.
Thursday the 11th in the afternoon?
Yeah, I'm good on that day.
Did Christy have?
I have open house that
Oh,
day. I mean, as long as,
Go ahead.
I have open house on the 11th, so that won't work.
Monday the 8th?
Monday the 8th.
That'll work.
Afternoon?
Monday the
It's okay, that's why we do this, like,
Oh, yeah.
if we can make it happen in a way that doesn't make anybody, okay, Monday the 8th, 3:15 to 5:15.
And that's your fourth session, I believe, we just scheduled? That'd be session number 4.
Yes,
Okay. And I am going to forewarn you, May, I'm out for like the first week of May, the second week of May, and the first 2 days of the third week of May.
okay.
So if you can get another April or 2 in. And
We
then-
can probably have Russ do a compensation presentation without our facilitator and limit it to that and no substantive discussion. Would be a way to do that.
Yeah. What's your sort of end goal in terms of ratification?
To get it ratified.
And what's the end of,
Yeah.
So,
Before teachers leave.
again, it's,
which is like first week of June?
yeah.
Right, got you.
The reason for that is that if we can, one, teachers are here, they get the email and they can ratify
Yeah.
it. It is nice, it's a nice favor to the finance folks because they can process them under way less time pressure and they don't have to do retroactive. But then also just from like who we want to be as Shawnee Mission, I think it's really nice to be able to tell teachers what they're gonna make next year.
Okay.
So,
So is there another date in April you want to look at, or do you want to?
yeah, we probably need to get another April date for sure.
And
in the afternoon.
12th, the afternoon of the 12th didn't work for me, and the 18th and 19th don't work.
Okay, so we have one on the 8th. What about the week of the 22nd, since we have one on the, it's kind of nice if we do like every other week.
And I'm open on that.
We probably just need to schedule it somewhere else because R&D forum will be here.
That whole week,
Yeah.
that's hard to do with the technology.
Even in the boardroom? It is, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's the entire building, but we can double check.
Okay. And I'm, yeah,
You could ask Leanne.
I think it's everywhere, isn't it?
And they're all week? It'll be Monday through Friday?
well, there's enough time, we can figure that out. If we want to look at that week before, I could do 17th, 18th, or 19th.
And I'm out for the 18th and 19th unless you make that your budget presentation, or I could be virtual for whatever.
I have kindergarten kickoff on the 18th.
Rachel, I have the R&D starts on the 17th, if that's correct.
It starts on the 17th?
Yes, that's what I have on my calendar.
Okay.
I need to send it to Ralph.
And is it Saturday the 27th that it, or no, it's all week now?
I mean, if we're not going to avoid the R&D on the 17th, then maybe we should just look at the next week, so we have a meeting every other week. So in terms of the week of the 22nd,
I have letters training on the 24th.
okay, so no 24. What about Tuesday, the 23rd in the afternoon?
I'm just hesitant because we'll be doing class placements during that time.
Okay.
And I have a staff meeting.
Oh, and it's a PLC day. Okay,
And it's
what
PLC, so
about
that's the best for me.
Thursday, the 25th?
Afternoon on that, too?
Okay. Thursday, April 25th, from 3:15 to 5:15. And then, if we want, we can go ahead and schedule compensation presentation. I just think it behooves us, given how difficult this has been. And again, if, we will review this as a potential meeting norm to adopt, but like, we understand that you may have family things or other things. I make this a priority because I'm lead negotiator, but certainly if somebody has something come up or you're sick, the show will go on, as we say in drama club. So. Okay, okay, so we're meeting the week of the 25th. We're meeting on the 25th. So why don't we look at the week of May 6th for a compensation presentation? Oh, yeah, there's like a date
The 13th is the board meeting. Doesn't he present?
at the board and then he presents to us. Thank you. So we need to look at the week, we need to look at 14, 15, 16, basically. Okay, thank you. Well, okay, what about May 15th for compensation presentation? 15th in the afternoon? Okay, so I will let Russ know, May 15th, we do not need you there. We know you're not available, Stephanie.
Yeah.
May 15th, 3:15, compensation presentation. And then, and this may need to be a longer meeting because when we work through compensation, Stephanie will guide us through breaking into these subgroups. And so usually we like talk about interests and then we break into subgroups and leave time for that to be done.
Have you been doing that the same day you get the presentation or not? It's
We all
residential,
digest
okay.
it and then we come back and flesh out interests and then break into groups. And then our groups develop, well, yeah, and then our groups develop something and we present it. So it usually takes
think-
like 2 meetings after the compensation presentation.
Yeah, so Russ would present on the 13th, and then I think him and Allison came in like the next day and gave essentially the same thing to us. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that how people are remembering it? And then we,
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of years when you've broken into your teams, you've done the work as the sub-teams here during the time you're together, and have other years you've gotten together outside of here, and how do you want to handle that this year? Because
So-
those are the meetings that I think you need the additional hours.
It's the same, it's like the same things. It's usually better if you have the time reserved on your calendar because we all work in different buildings and sites across the district. So it's kind of nice if we can just, you don't have to. Sometimes subgroups I think have met other times, but I think it's easiest if we all just leave and go somewhere in this building. It usually does not take more than 45 minutes to develop a proposal with your sub-team. So, I mean, in
Unless there's something
theory-
very different or very
Yes.
complicated or challenging with the budget.
Do we want to think about doing a half day on that day?
Yeah.
To have the longer time, and if we were able to come to a consensus, that should be
Yeah.
the last thing to finalize everything.
Yeah.
Because that would give us another week afterwards to put a ratification vote out.
It would be nice if we could try and fit in, because, I mean, the 27th is, in theory, the last week of school, right? So we could do something the week of the 20th.
That'd be good if you could do your maybe 4-hour chunk and your committee work, your subcommittee work the
Yep.
week of the 20th.
So,
Rachel, I'm out of town the week of the 20th.
okay. And that's okay. We might just,
Could you get Russ's presentation the week of the
that's
6th?
true. Could we what?
Get Russ's presentation the week of the 6th?
No,
And then-
because
okay.
he has to give the presentation
Oh,
to the
right.
board
That's
first.
right.
And I think he's giving it like, he like just gets all the information prior to
Okay.
giving it to the board. So knowing that Christy is out,
So on the 15th, could we do the longer meeting, he present and then we go in our
we could do
subgroup?
that.
Yeah.
like that.
We could do that. So
That
we-
is it's actually, it's a travel day for me.
Okay.
But depending on when you do it, I could come on virtual to give you your committee directions. That's
Okay.
nothing but 10 minutes. It's the screen share I do that says, here's what you're tasked with.
Okay.
Um,
So like meet at noon, meet at 1. What
In the
time?
interest of making sure we get that done, especially if we decide to explore potential other options, I would say the longer we have for that day, the better.
Okay. Is that if we say noon, can you guys transition out of whatever you?
I can be here by noon.
Okay,
So this is the Shawnee Mission compensation presentation and small group breakouts.
yes. And that's really, I don't think too bad for virtual, because we're not getting into like sensitive, like this is what I think we should do with compensation discussion. It is
It's just you all breaking out
really
doing your work.
instruction from Stephanie.
And
Okay.
what time did you say on that one?
Noon to 5:15.
We were thinking maybe this year not like doing the subgroups because it feels very predetermined, like how much money we're
Okay.
gonna have. And it doesn't feel like the IBB process with that. So could we look at an alternative method of where we like look at the issues before we break into subgroups or
To
just not
talk
even break?
more in
just like-
depth, frame and
yes.
focus the issues under interest?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. What time are you saying on that date? Let me see if I can't just be at a stable place and be virtual for your
The
good first 2
afternoon,
hours.
noon
So
to
the
five.
first 2 hours, to get the presentation and spend some time digging into interest a little deeper
Yep.
before you break into groups.
Yep.
So if you're noon to something, I'm gonna make sure I'm at a stable place and available from like noon to 2.
Yep.
And then maybe your second 2 hours would be breakouts. Even if it's an hour breakout, it's better than nothing.
And then we'll probably need one more day then, right? To
Oh, yeah.
present those and see if we can come to a consensus.
And I want to say that, so I've sort of heard this early when folks are doing IBB the first year, the idea that, you know, we're going to just hear a dollar amount that's allocated in the budget can feel like it's not IBB, that's too traditional. They've already decided compensation, and then you all sort of figure out how to spend it. You should think about that budget presentation as the opportunity to say why that dollar amount, right? Or to explore if there's other information you all feel like you need to say, can we weigh in more on what's allocated towards salary? You should have the flexibility to ask Russ those questions. I just want to put that out there, that if he wants to provide a more comprehensive explanation on how that dollar amount was determined, so that people have the information to explore alternatives if they want to. I think that meeting should be like that.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure you guys know that. So Russ's presentation, and then conversation regarding interest around sort of the sub-salary sections. And then I break you into groups. So I'm going to make sure I'm with you from noon to 2 or even a little bit later. And then you guys' last half of that meeting is group work. And so your next meeting would report back from your groups. And if I happen to get back in town a day early, I will be here in person.
So at least, Christy, you would be participating in preparation of a proposal if you're not here the week of the 20th. We can also look at the week of the 27th. I don't know, in my mind, I was like, that's the last week of school. Right, so, and I guess in theory, we could look at 16th and 17th, right? I mean, that's early, but.
Are we coming back after we meet the groups to talk about it?
It just depends.
How much time you use in your group?
Last year, we have 2 of the groups to the exact same.
Yeah.
Last time you guys were lightning fast.
It's just, I mean, it's difficult to anticipate, like, you know, if, you know, sometimes it goes really quick and then sometimes there are lots of questions and,
Especially if groups decide to get into the longevity piece of it. And, yeah. I think if you guys will know, if all groups are sort of wrapping up and you still have an hour, come back and present. But if not, we need a date.
and maybe it would help too with, I'm just thinking, as to your comment, Amber, if we, I mean, what we do is we send Russ, we want answers to these questions. So what is this % of fund balance? What is this? What is this? And he's just presenting those answers. And so maybe if we came up with those questions that we need answered together, so it is clear that Russ is just answering those questions and not presenting a pot. Like, obviously, for those of us who represent the board, we have to keep in mind appropriate fund balances and things like that. So we need to know that information. But we could do that. We could come up with together a list of questions that we just want answers from him. So it is information that he's providing in response to questions as opposed to this is all, you know, this is the number.
And how soon ahead of this will he be presenting to the board, and is that something that you guys can link into and watch prior to this in case issues come up from that presentation? That you can, is there at least a day in between that if you have questions come
Yeah.
up from the first time you hear it,
Yeah.
you
we
can
could
send
do
it
that.
over?
Yeah, there's really only like one or two additional pieces that he gives to us, and again, that's in response to, hey, we need to know these numbers. So yeah, that would certainly be possible, and he's really good about being available.
So Rachel, can you send out to everyone when the board presentation is from Russ? So-
It's the 13th, everybody
Okay.
has those on
All
their
right.
calendars.
And then that would give a day in between to
Yep.
send concerns and questions to Russ that you want him to be prepared to answer. And then,
And then we'd have that half day on the 15th. Do we feel like we need to go ahead and reserve some more time? So we have it reserved, or do we want to wait until we know?
I think it'd be
if-
good to get it on the calendar just in case. We
Yeah,
can
I
cancel-
kind
we
of
can
feel
always
like that
cancel.
too. So we could look at the 16th, 17th and see if,
Not the 17th unless it's after 3:15, that's field day, and I can't do that to a sub.
oh, you're very kind. What about Thursday, the 16th?
and I'll be back in person for sure by then.
Okay, and what time do we think? I feel like we need to reserve that, I mean, I don't know, it might be safer to reserve the afternoon again, just because we know we have these pieces about longevity and supplemental. Okay, let's go ahead and reserve noon to, 5 or 5:15 on that day too, because again, that's definitely something that you don't want to have. We have had a year where afterward, we're like, wait, we had this question and we didn't get it answered, and I think just having the time and space and not time pressure, if we get done at 2, that's great. Okay. I will be sending everyone all of these, Clayton, Communications, everyone I sent.
When we're putting in for a sub, how do you want us to code it?
It's professional leave, Dr. Schumacher?
Yeah,
For
is there a
budgeting.
drop down for NEA? I think we have an NEA. Let me look real quick and I'll tell you for
We had
sure.
said that we were gonna split it every other, like the district would do one, Shawnee Mission would do one, is what Rachel
Okay.
and I had discussed.
Perfect.
Is your 15th going till 5:30, or 5:15, or is your 15th only going till 4?
May 15th, I would say noon until 5-ish, 5:15. Again, we never have to go that long, but
Okay. Okay, and I'll look for your invites. I am going to have my response go to you guys so that you know I've got it.
thank you, I appreciate that, Stephanie.
Mhm.
We need more budget codes for subs. Have you guys seen this? It's crazy.
There's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, for the ones in which we're paying for, just do professional and HR default. And then I think you guys have a drop down. You do? Okay, so.
It's the easy one to find.
So John, the document you did find that was related to the work you all did around, what does it look like? Is it an issue statement with 5 steps done, or is it the result of?
I couldn't find the
Okay.
5-step anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
Do you want me to share my screen?
That way folks that weren't part of that
Amber.
year can just hear how you took it on and
Yep.
how you got to where you are now and before you start looking
Okay,
for it.
hang on.
I think Amber has it, Rachel.
Oh, great. Thank you, Amber. Okay, so everyone can do a little mindset shift. We are moving to the next item on our agenda, which is Shawnee Mission issue statement number 1 about our negotiation process. We do typically, as a meeting norm, take turns doing issue statements. And so Amber graciously agreed to let us go first, so the next time we will tackle an issue raised by the association. This is gonna be like in my way, let's see, way back in my brain. Okay, here we go. So this is how Stephanie would have had us frame the issue statement. How do we continue to use the IBB process to problem solve while remaining compliant with the Negotiations Act? And what does our process look like? And
The why does it matter is really the same as what are our interest.
okay.
You know, why do we need to do it? And so the reason you all needed to take that on is listed there, if you want to go through those.
So the first bullet is develop and maintain positive relationships. Everyone here sitting at this table is agreeing to volunteer as a representative on this team. So it's not part of our regular 9 to 5 duties. It's something we've all agreed to do. And I think no one wants to feel like, I mean, no one wants to be beaten up for a role that we have to serve in, right? And we recognize that when we sit here, what we're talking about is representative interests. So not necessarily what I might personally want is an idealistic thing, but I think it's important to recognize that we are all serving in a representative capacity. And when you do that, what you're speaking about is what you think are the interests of the group that you're representing. So we want to make sure that we have positive relationships and that overall, while this may be a stressful experience or a time-consuming experience, that we all come out of it feeling like we've done good work and accomplished something for Shawnee Mission School District and its professional employees. As I reviewed earlier, and I won't bore you guys again, I do want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence as the legal representative for Shawnee Mission School District and that we're complying with the requirements of the act and not mowing over anything so that we're not in essentially very legally messy territory should we ever not be able to reach an agreement. Oh yes, this was an interest I think the association raised, but I remember Stephanie saying in past years that sometimes you look at these and you don't even know which side raised it. But we wanted to make sure that we don't set how a future group or team might negotiate. And that's why we've done these sort of 1-year collective commitments, right? It's just for this year, it's just what we're doing, and it's also why we review it every year. We want to have the ability to address issues and concerns that are more high-level, large, district-wide staff concerns. We want to have transparency and trust in this process. That is, again, why we do things like the joint statements and why we do the shared Google Drive. I know when I started in this position, started doing negotiations, people were like bringing me binders from like gosh knows when that had like their personal notes, and I just thought, this is a transparent process. It is a public process by law. There's no reason why anyone should have, I mean, we may have our separate records on how we've developed issue statements, but everything that happens in here is shared and open and should be available for anyone, whoever wants to look at it. So that's why we have the shared Google Drive. Obviously, we want to avoid conflict, make sure we have adequate time. We sort of talked about that as we're scheduling meetings. I think we found in the past that sometimes meetings go quicker and sometimes they go slower, but we don't want to have time pressure. We've already reviewed that it's nice. It's an ideal, not always practically possible, but it's nice to have teachers ratify while they're on contract. I just have to say is like, from my experience, it really makes us look like we have our business together in Shawnee Mission. And I like that. When I talk to other school districts and they're like, oh, it's October and our teachers don't know how much they're being paid and we're still in it, it just, to me, looks like you don't have your stuff together. And I like when we get our business done here and everybody knows what they're making for the upcoming school year. I think that's really positive. We talked about taking stress off the notice letters, and that's because the notice letters really tie you to what you talk about in negotiations. And so we do have some flexibility with the issue statements. Again, we use that collective commitment just to make sure that nobody's part of the issue with the Negotiations Act. And here's what I'm getting to, which is messy. If either side says, sure, we'll negotiate this thing that we don't have to negotiate, and then we get to impasse, that is a topic for impasse because we have thereby agreed to negotiate it. So we just want to make clear, and that's why I made the prior statement about portions of the calendar that aren't impacted by existing provisions in the P&A. We just want to make clear that we're not inadvertently agreeing. So, for example, and I'll just raise this since it's not in any issue statement, let's say we talked about class size in here. That's something that's expressly reserved as not being negotiable. And then we talked about it, and then we went to impasse potentially there could be an argument that that's now an issue for a hearing officer to weigh in on, when by the law, that's supposed to be something that the board reserves as a management right for our school district. So that's what I'm getting to when I say we want to have the flexibility, but also not undermine the Negotiations Act. We want to make sure that we have a way to have continual communication between the association and the district's board and administration. We do like having a third-party facilitator. I think it helps a lot so that no one person in here feels like they have to like run the meeting or be the boss of the meeting. I think that's really nice. The next point is about having sufficient and needed information to have productive discussions. So we will regularly agree in here that we need to do homework, we need to gather data, we need information to make a decision. And we've done, I think, really good. I would definitely pat ourselves on the back for bringing information here when we needed it to make a good decision. Consistency in team makeup. So we have had, I think, honestly, a good level of consistency. We do ask our building administrators who serve on the team to serve for at least 2 years so that they can take their experience into the second year. I've been consistent. We've had several members from the association be consistent. It is a big time commitment, so I understand when people come on and off, and that's why we only ask our building principals for a 2-year commitment. But it's nice that we've always had some level of consistency from year to year. The reason you see the next bullet point is because that is the number of team members has been a point in our collective commitment. And then just want this to be a collaborative process, again, have trust, and make sure that everybody understands the method that we're going to use to negotiate. So we developed all these solutions. This is really helping. Thank you, Jill.
So we were
In
at, step
past
number
years-
1 was the issue statement, which,
Yes.
how do we make, or how are we compliant with the PNA and do IBB at the same time? Why do we have to figure it out was the interest Rachel just went through. We have to figure it out because we want to do all these things. And now, how might we do it? These are things you all came up with as a team on, so how might we sort of combine the act with the IBB process? These were the possible things you said you would do 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what we've done with all of these solutions is sort of gather them into a collective commitment. And so I think it probably makes sense to just go in and review from 23, 24, that collective commitment. And
would you scroll down and see how you worded the consensus on all those ideas? Because what you did is you took all the ideas and created a way to do this. But how did you word your consensus, or did you, when you get below the brainstormed ideas?
that is a great question.
Or you just started putting it together?
We
I
just
guess?
started
Okay.
putting it together. I remember now, in that meeting, we said, these are the topics we would like to address in a collective commitment. So we went topic by topic. So we sort of came up with what we agreed on, and then I went home and did homework and tried to memorialize that into like an MOU or collective commitment and brought it back. So we did it topic by topic because there were several different areas that we wanted to talk about. And that's why it's formatted like it is, where you see those bold bullet point numbers, because those were the topics we agreed to. So like the method, the team members, the timeline, notice letter, and issue statement.
So this issue statement 3 years ago is basically how do we align the two processes,
Yes.
the ACT and the IBB. The issue statement this year is how do we better align.
Yes.
So in order to do that, you need to see what you did. So
Yes.
you're going to go ahead and share somebody had that collective
I
commitment
think
process.
Amber already had it up. Yep. So this would be from a year ago. And some of this, like, it feels a little weird because, like, since we're here, we've already sort of pre-agreed to do some of these things, right? So the first is, again, like, it seems weird because we're already here and Stephanie's already here, but this just memorializes that we've agreed to do IBB with a facilitator. That's all that section 1 is. And then section 2, again, seems a little weird. We're already here, but we agree that we're going to have 10 team members. And to me, I think what that means is, like, if someone's ill or whatever reason and can't serve on the team anymore, we would reappoint. And also, we're not going to bring randomly someone else to the table to participate as a team member. So again, I think we've sort of aligned with this, and I don't know if we want to be this specific if we do a version for this year. But this is what I alluded to when I said we've typically met twice a month in February, March, and April. And then May is typically compensation. And again, we've had this ideal of scheduling them in the afternoon, but that hasn't always been possible. This is, again, we're already doing this, having an organizational meeting at our first meeting every year. And then the next section starts going into how we start discussing compensation in May. And what we've sort of said, and again, this is to avoid that sort of conflict and pushing us to a point where the collaborative problem-solving process has ended, but we're continuing. What we've said is, hey, if we get to a point in May or if we get to early June and there's no proposal that's going to work because perhaps we just don't have an agreement as to the overall amount of money to spend, that we're just going to stop, right? Because I feel like at that point we've spun our wheels, we've said we don't agree, and if we don't have an agreement as to the number and we can't get to an agreement, then we would essentially be at impasse on that issue, right? And that would be a point where we would need to have a hearing officer intervene. So what we've sort of said is we're not going to push ourselves and continue to meet over the summer. We would take a break, we would come back, we would try again and see if with additional information or additional time we can get to an agreement. But if we can't, at that point we would just stop having meetings. And if we want to do this again this year, I've already sort of pre-started a joint statement, but I will again be happy to prepare joint statements after each meeting. I do get good feedback on those. The process has been, and if everyone's comfortable, that after the meeting, I prepare a statement and then I share it with everybody. And I ask as soon as you can, you don't need to stay up till midnight or do anything, but as soon as you can, give it a quick review. You can make comments. It is not like everyone has editing access. So you can make suggestions, you can make comments, you can edit stuff. But ultimately, I do not send until both Amber and I get to a place where we're like, yes, it's good. So, and sometimes, like I know last year, Jill was like, I'm in meetings, I have things, please wait. And we just waited. So ideally, we get it out around the next morning, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. And we just wait until we're all good with it and it's correct. I don't put sometimes they're really long, but I don't put a ton of detail in there. Like I don't list out every interest we talked about. We try and stay away from things where we know we're just like not on the same page. They're more just like, if you want to know what happened and what we got through and high level discussion, that's the information it gives you. And number 4 is where I try to clarify for us that by engaging in an IBB discussion about something, neither side is agreeing to negotiate something that is deemed non-mandatory under the Act. So we clarified earlier, for example, that there are portions of calendar issues discussed in the P&A already. But if we discuss other issues and even make adjustments on that, I put this in there as a protective mechanism, basically, so that if we would get to impasse, we could show an arbitrator that that's not an issue for impasse, that's an issue for a future year or some other issue. And again, that makes me feel comfortable and like we're complying with the Act and frankly not setting a precedent. I do think we all need to be mindful of our training that we do on the Act and the separation between negotiable and non-mandatorily negotiable issues. And again, why that's messy is because under the Act, there are permissive issues, and one of the permissive issues is anything that you agree mutually to talk about. And so if we've agreed mutually to talk about something in here, I just don't want it to get construed as something we've agreed to negotiate. And then the last is our taking turns agreement, I would say, right? Like generally, as a rough estimate, we try and spend around the same amount of time and take turns. Now, obviously, there's going to be some issues that just take more time. Our late resignation issue took a lot of time last year. But again, as long as everybody feels like they had adequate time, I think that's the goal. And then our meeting norms, again, these might seem kind of silly, but they are basically what differentiates us from everything that Stephanie talked about with traditional negotiations. And so we don't sidebar, right? Like we don't, hang on, I need to go talk, like we're supposed to all be on the same team such that sidebars and caucuses are not necessary. I will say we've had times where we've like completely gone through the IBB process, but people just aren't ready. Like they're like, I can't sitting here right now do the thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down thing. I think that's okay. And I think that's the way we handle that is like, I can't right now. I need to take time. I need to process. What we really mean is that we're not going to stop the meeting and go in separate rooms and have separate discussions. We try and honor, and we've never had an issue with this, but honor the time, try and make this a priority. Obviously, illness, emergency, we can continue the meeting without a team member. We've also done really good with if I agree I'm going to bring information forward, I'm going to have that timely to the team. And I don't know if there's anything, Amber, is there anything else you want to highlight from the meeting norms or the rest of this? I think it's the only thing that I see that's not congruent with last year, and I don't know if it matters and we could just take it out, is the part about meetings like being after school. We did strive to do that this year, so I'd be fine if we left it in, but frankly our meetings are already scheduled, so I don't know that I have a preference on leaving it or taking it out. Hours of 8 to 5. Yeah, I mean, I think we're within that. I think it makes sense to keep it.
So ideally, in the world of IBB, this document that y'all created and updated last year, it should contain the mechanisms to meet the interests that were identified around equity, transparency, and being compliant, and efficiency, et cetera. But you've agreed in here to take a look at it every year so that either party can raise, hey, that hasn't seemed to meet the interest or it hasn't been working. And that's where I guess we are on issue statement number 1 from the district. How do we better align it? And then to hear you unpack, whoever's going to speak on behalf of that issue statement, what the focus is on that this year. And then we will start the IBB process of brainstorming solutions to that together.
So, and I don't know, Stephanie, I would look for guidance from you. We did have the only thing different that we had this year is, talking about our schedule for negotiation meetings and wanting to have, and again, this is for either future years or for potentially talking about the term of this P&A. And I don't know time-wise when it makes sense to have that discussion, if that's part of this, if that's separate.
I'm transparently thinking out loud. So I don't know they have a right or wrong answer. I'm just thinking out loud because I think you all know quite a bit too. You can think out loud about this. Generally, sort of what dictates if you can do a multi-year agreement is usually economics or compensation. Sometimes. Meaning the parties are sort of in the situation where you need to determine, salary for more than 1 year. And so in order to do that, it comes down to deciding together, do you have the ability to do that? There are other ways to do multi-year agreements. It could be that you do a multi-year agreement for everything that's non-economic, and if you don't have what you need to determine salary for 2 years right now, then you just open that contract to do salary in a year, but nothing else. So that's really sort of what determines how you want to structure the length of your contract. Duration's usually tied to, do we have enough information to do money? And if not, how do we want to address that?
So I don't think we have any information at all, and if we even want to broach on compensation, I think the issue for us is how do we spend essentially what would be an appropriate amount of time working on, and I would probably focus it on the terms and conditions of the P&A. I don't know, and I'd have to talk to Russ about whether even, it's
say
really
what you mean on that
difficult.
when you say you'd like to focus on the terms and conditions.
So we have made a lot of really large changes in the P&A's terms and conditions over the past couple years, and I think they were things that were probably sitting out there that needed to be worked on. We also completely revised the salary schedule. But my high level thought about this is that we are meeting for a semester for a contract that lasts 2 semesters. And that seems to me to be like, we need to have times in the PNA where those terms and conditions are stable. I think we've all gotten to a point this year where I'm like, gosh, are there some things? Yes. Is it like, in terms of terms and conditions that we want to notice? Yes. But we're getting fewer and fewer where we don't even have stability periods to look in and say what's working, what's not working. Okay, now we have enough to come forward and negotiate terms and conditions again. So that's where my mind is going with that, is that to some extent, we shouldn't be in there messing with the terms and the conditions of the PNA so frequently, right? Or if, I know that we've talked a lot about the importance of making sure that high level, district-wide or employee group-wide issues have a forum and have a place to be heard.
And where, if we do that and we have a place, would that just be at board meetings? Or, because that would be my only concern, well, I have several, but my concerns with having a multi-year contract, and you mentioned this when you were talking about just going over norms and stuff and how basically quickly last year went and how effective it was.
Yep.
I mean, to me, the reason it's effective is because we're consistently meeting. So we're consistently meeting and we're consistently keeping that line of communication open. And if we go to a multi-year, I feel like things will be missed. You're going to lose trust of some of the staff members because, again, where will we bring those things up? Would it be to just buildings? Would it be to board members? How do they get their voices heard at that point if and when there are issues? And I mean, again, consistently meeting means that we become more effective and we become quicker at that. So that's my thing. I get it, but I do think it's beneficial.
I see the value in that too. I like the transparency of this process where we are very publicly having conversations that you're hearing from your members that are questions or concerns. I think there is an avenue for the association to get to the superintendent or other administration in the district where they can have that dialogue. And then, in my thinking, if we agreed to a multi-year agreement, that would be the mechanism to get those questions answered. Jill or Amber or whomever it may be could have those conversations, report back to the membership. I see an open dialogue that we've created over the last 4 or 5 years that's really productive. But we would lose that open forum that we have right now that there's some value in.
Creates like a middleman at that point. So like we're losing that transparency as having Jill or board members at that point, then having to have those side conversations when we can have them here at a table.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So I want to try to a little bit rein it in so we get it into the 5-step process. I think, or I may just want to listen for a little bit longer. It feels as though there's an idea out there and we didn't really sort of 5-step the interest, right? The idea is a multi-year contract for the purposes of terms and conditions, and now we're talking about the pros and cons of it. We really didn't do 5 steps to get to that point, so I would like to hear a little bit more. I'd like to hear a little bit more of, but I don't want you to identify the interest behind your idea. I'm trying to get it back to the issue statement of better align the Professional Negotiation Act and the IBB process, or do we need to revisit what is the issue statement? Right? We need to get a proper issue statement if we're going to IBB this.
Yeah. So I would, I'm not even going to look at our issue statement that we wrote. I would say that it's how do we spend, an appropriate amount of time on negotiating terms and conditions of the PNA, and also distinguish what are appropriate PNA or negotiation topics from maybe other things that are better addressed through the avenues that Dr. Schumacher discussed. I will say that I have less concern about that given the issue statements that both sides raised this year. It does not feel like there are any superfluous things that are better addressed in other avenues from both sides. Like that definitely, I definitely have less concern about that they're waiting, that we have had years where we've waded into things that we've been in the middle and I'm like, this just is not a negotiations topic, right? But we're not supposed to do that with IBB. We're not supposed to say, well, this issue isn't really one for negotiations, right? So I think we both like, both sides have learned about that through this year, and this is this is manageable, this is all district-wide, this isn't going down any, like, sort of more niche things, so.
I think if we said, how do we spend the appropriate amount of time and frequency negotiating terms and conditions, it does not embed a solution.
Yep.
It is a problem that's identified by, one side outside of here. If we start peeling back the interest, then, it's open to everyone's interest around this. And then I think we could start to brainstorm, right? Because there's probably some sort of hybrid version of a solution in here that would meet interest. But let's go into interest. First, let me restate this, and then I'm going to screen share. How do we spend the appropriate amount of time and frequency negotiating terms and conditions? That's pretty neutral.
Yep.
So let's start talking about, why do we care about spending the appropriate amount of time and frequency? Why do we care? What are the interests?
Efficient use of time.
Say again?
Efficient use of time.
Because?
We
We're all
all
I
very
think there's a
busy.
lot in there. There's a lot behind that.
We're all very busy. We all have other responsibilities, mainly to our kids, of course, our students and our own kids. Yeah.
So recognize other core responsibilities in the district and outside
Yep.
of the individuals that do this, right? Other interest on why you want to get it right in terms of how much time and frequency you're giving this.
Ensuring we meet the needs of the bargaining unit and the Board of Education.
Can you talk more about the needs?
I think that we try things out and we don't always have them perfect. So that's why it's great to be able to come back and talk about that the next year. Like, I think there are several things that we're bringing year after year because we're not getting it perfect. And so that ability to come back and talk about
Ability
it.
to refine and check in and
Yes,
refine.
yeah.
You don't always need it on everything, but you want the ability.
Yes.
Other interest? Why else do you need to get this right in terms of the time and frequency?
So, I'm going to see if I can say this properly. Avoid pressure to just come with issues that maybe aren't really pressing issues because we are negotiating every year. We need to generate a certain number of issue statements, if that makes sense. Like the pressure to say, well, we think they're going to bring 8 issues, so we better bring 8 issues.
Have we had that issue?
I would say this year we've had a lot less issue statements, but I started to think through, because we've redone the salary schedule, we've worked on some major provisions both ways in the P&A, that I'm like, well, gosh, like, if we get a solution on PLCs and if we feel like we've reviewed data on late resignations and we do these things, are we going to even have P&A issues next year? Or are we going to have enough, like, and I have a solution to that, but I just don't want us to
Don't go
feel like,
there.
No, I get it, yeah.
I don't want us to feel like we're generating issues. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're generating issues because we both have to come up with these robust issue statements, but gosh, we've met every single year for the past 5 years, and so all of the major things that could have come up during that time period have come up.
But I mean, my thing to that is like, negotiations is not a new thing. So obviously something's going on where we're needing to continuously meet. Otherwise, this would have been a refined thing and we wouldn't have to meet. So that's, I don't know. That's neither here nor there, but that's just,
Yeah.
that's my thought.
Absolutely.
As we- as we talk this through.
Historically, there have been every year, but it's been like a fraction of the time. And my understanding in talking to other colleagues is like, when I say we're negotiating in January, they're like, what are you doing? Like, how, what, when, why?
Well, remember, everyone, keep an open mind as you are thinking about interest, that our goal will be to meet all these interests. Everybody stay completely open on how.
Right.
Okay.
Right? Challenging to do, since there's already an idea out there. You got to just put that idea away, stay open on the how when we get there. So I am going to word it like this: avoid coming up with issues that may not be contractual or important, or that there's a different or more appropriate avenue for them. Okay, other interest on why it's important to get the amount of time and the frequency that you spend here right?
I mean, we're speaking for our members, so that's the big thing, is being able to get our members' voices heard. That's 80-90% of the reason that we're doing it, so.
Do you all do any quarterly labor management meetings on a high level?
There's standing meetings between NEA and the superintendent.
Okay. It's just a question. Are you having them, and who creates the agenda?
We are having them, and that's a Jill and Dr. Hubbard in default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have
Besides
them-
the fact that, yes, we are in fact
We have
having
them once
them.
a month, and either of us can put stuff on the agenda.
And I think we don't want time pressure. I mean, at the same time, to the extent we are talking about terms and conditions, it does not behoove us to have a process that feels rushed.
I need to think through.
So you want to get the timing important because you want it to, no, you don't want time pressure.
Yes.
I'm going back to Casey's comment because I agree. So maybe the question is, I need to think of it as an interest. So is the negotiations act or the negotiations practice the proper avenue to accomplish, making sure that your members and our teachers have their voices heard? Or is there another method to get that done, right? Is that the intent of negotiations, to be able to,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Because quite frankly,
Right.
if there was an
It's
issue
not.
statement, how do we ensure member voices are heard via communication? You all would come up with a million ways if you issued statement that. And I'm not recommending that you do, but I'm just saying that if this is an interest, stay open-minded about how. There may be a more effective way. The negotiation process sort of assumes everything is going to be contractual. In an IBB, it doesn't always turn out to be that way.
I'll also say it's great right now that, and I hope this continues, but I know Jill and Dr. Hubbard have a great working relationship right now with those standing meetings, but I think we do need to recognize that Dr. Hubbard's retiring. And so we will have a new superintendent next year. And again, ideally, those meetings continue and are great how they are happening now. But that is something we need to recognize as well as we're having this topic of conversation.
When you all have thank you. I think that's important to recognize. When you all have taken on you've done some real systemic changes in your process over the past 4 or 5 years, it feels like to me from an outsider perspective. How often have you built in the ability to check in or refine it someplace besides bargaining? Built it into the language of what you've done? Or have you ever?
Pilot programs. I mean, we've had pilot programs that we say this is not going to be forever. And in fact, our Super Bowl day, it just is like this rolling, let's check in, and it's not going to be, forever, but.
So you do, when you call it a pilot so you call it a pilot at the beginning?
Sure looks that way right now.
So we can always, for things that, particularly things that are new and that we're not sure about, we need to test and try, we have had that ability to build in pilot programs with the required check-in.
Same thing with the $1,000 bonus,
Yeah.
Right.
which is, we just continually renew.
Yes. Which we should put a pin
That
in
could just
that.
be,
Are there other interests you have here? I added members' issues being heard on a timely basis.
I'd say don't undermine, we don't want to understate the importance of negotiations, right? Like, I don't want to do anything that creates this impression that no one thinks that it's an important process deserving of time. And I know I talked about that last year because I was very scared to even raise that because I don't want to create that impression. I want to create the impression that we give it the time that it needs and that we put a lot of effort into it. I just, again, go back to that interest of not doing it just to do it, right? And if we are doing 1 year, do we need a semester to work on it? And I don't know. I mean, I don't have data. I will be very transparent that I asked KASB for statewide data on amount of time that districts spend negotiating and for the length of the average P&A, and they do not have that data, and I don't think anyone does.
I can get that data for you pretty easily.
That would be
Talking to
great.
my colleagues, and I would say it varies.
Yeah.
There are districts that bargain year-round. There are districts locally here that started back in January. And then there's some that, I work with a local that does it in 2 days.
Yes.
But they're a smaller local, and I would also say they don't have the robust contract that we have.
So I'll just share for anyone listening, because she's not on a microphone. Linda Seek
They're wireless.
was able to share that in terms of the amount, the timeline spent negotiating, so there's the start date and end date, but also the number of hours that you negotiate, that varies, and that she's aware of districts that do year-round, that do semester, that do 1 week. And the amount of hours in that time could vary greatly, and then the length, whether it's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and whether that length is just terms and conditions or everything also varies. I would say that I have an interest in doing a process that works for Shawnee Mission. So I think that data is helpful, but I also think that we need to do what works for Shawnee Mission. We are a very large district with a large and varied employee group. And so I fully, recognize that I don't think anybody here thinks that a week is the appropriate amount of time, or that 3 hours is the appropriate amount of time.
We can come back and say other interest, but look at them, did we capture the main interest? Efficient use of time overall of the district and the NEA. Recognize other core responsibilities of each individual that makes this happen. Ensure meet the needs of the bargaining unit and the board. And further under that, the ability to check in and refine things that are currently in the agreement or in the works. Avoid coming up with issues that may have another avenue or that may not be important, but just, hey, we're going to meet, we need to come up with something. I can see where that'd be problematic, even though I think people recognize it hasn't happened with this group at this point. Not to feel rushed, you want to avoid time pressures, so you want to give yourself enough time. Member issues being heard on a timely basis, the ability to check in on or refine previous year's work, which maybe I've got that repetitive of, maybe that's a duplicate. Other interest, there's not a bad interest, there's just a bad interest if you don't share what it is.
I just also making sure that we're in line with the Professional Negotiations Act.
Is everybody familiar enough with that act to go forward and know that? We kind of
I should be.
think of-
like any legislation,
up.
it is the worst thing you will ever read, ever. It is long and
It is
boring and not broken up, and subject to interpretation by various Department of Labor opinions. And frankly, it's really nice that we do IBB, because one thing that I talked about when we started this collective commitment was that, even though I'm an attorney, I have feelings, and I don't want to have to come in here and be like, no, we can't talk about that. And if it's important and it's district and it's high level, I want this balance of if this is the appropriate avenue, I don't want to have to send a formal, in the past, you will have districts that send formal letters that say, we will not negotiate this because our interpretation under this DOL opinion is that this is not something that we have to talk about. And I don't want to do that. I don't think that serves
It doesn't
either side
result
well.
in good language and good solutions for
Right.
districts and for teachers. Do you want to move on to brainstorming ideas?
Yes.
I have multi-year contract for purposes of language.
Terms, for the
Okay.
terms and conditions. And again, this is why I asked about timing, because it's awkward to do it now. We can't pre-agree, right? I just don't think that's something we can pre-agree to right now. So I would say give consideration to a multi-year contract at the conclusion of negotiations.
Is there a reason we don't start this process earlier? Is there a reason we wait until January, February to start it? Can we not start it in October?
You
Well,
can.
your first year or so you did. you all sort of to catch up and to get
Yep.
the first time you did IBB, you kind of.
I think to
Because
That's all
maybe that would solve some of those. Like,
And-
again, I don't want to jump to
Yeah, look,
other things,
no,
but.
please jump in. Look and tell us what you think.
But maybe
it
that would solve some of
addresses.
that, that way we don't feel like we have to cram a whole bunch of meetings in within every other week for 3 months. We could.
So longer duration, but less
Yeah.
frequency, like once a month or
Yeah,
something?
then maybe it wouldn't feel quite as, I don't want to
Yeah.
say time consuming, because again, that's not necessarily like the point. So, yeah,
So a longer duration to bargain, but less frequent meetings.
right.
The only thing the only thing with that is then you'd have to prepare your issue statements, like let's say we started in October. So you've had 2 months of your school year under your new contract, and
There'd
then
be
you're preparing
challenges.
issue statements.
Agreed.
So.
You'd almost have to accommodate, so the ability to bring issue statements in later. Let's get the brainstorm mode going, then go back and pick each one sort of
Okay.
at a time. So what else? Let's get
Continue
into
to
that.
Continue
course
doing what we're doing.
What we're doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, what else?
In the practice of ideas that just are being thrown out there, traditional bargaining.
Say that again?
Traditional bargaining could be an option if maybe.
Hopefully.
How
we
does,
don't.
how does it meet the interest? I mean, what does that solve for?
Time only.
Time.
Solve the time.
Yeah.
Traditional bargaining solves for time. I have to think about that.
It does, except for every
I was gonna
fifth
say,
or
it
10th
could
year.
Quick, you know, relatively quick.
Okay, other ideas?
We could have a conference prior to negotiations and agree on a number of issue statements. I will say some years it's felt really overwhelming. Like it does not feel like this year. It feels really
Brief.
Like within the
doable.
last.
It feels doable. There
Within
have
the
been
last 3 or
years.
4, has it felt overwhelming? Like since we had, oh God, the 1920 year?
Yeah.
When that was a rough year, so.
The 1920 was IBB, or your traditional was 1819, wasn't it?
My first year with the district was 1920. and
My
that's-
first year was the year that we went.
That
we
all was
went
your
to
first
impasse
year
that
at
year, I
the
believe.
district?
Yeah,
So-
it was.
Yeah. It was a rough year, all the way around, so.
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yes,
that's- yeah.
there's been some years that I'm like, we cannot possibly get through
Yeah.
all these, and it feels like we are, like, this isn't the place for them, we can't come up with a solution here, or we are rushing, or there's an issue.
Agree on limited number of issue statements in advance. I've added as an idea. There could be sort of a hybrid version of that, agree on limiting new.
Unlimited what?
You know,
New
I mean,
issue
what I've
statements?
seen you guys bring forward is nothing I haven't seen brought forward before,
Right.
yeah.
right?
Oh, the limited number of new issue statements or something?
So that you are checking in on the things that are.
I was gonna say, but that, I feel like that would be
That
limiting
maybe what
to
you need
what
to
we
do
would
is
be able
only
to bring
bring
to
new
the table,
ones.
so
Only-
that's,
it may be the
that's my
opposite of
only
that, only
concern is
bring
that
new
maybe
ones
we're
forward.
missing something that could potentially pop up.
Right, because we
that-
could flip it, only bring new ones forward.
Right, so.
Because we just dealt with the others last year, only bring new ones forward.
Right.
But then are you going to be, thinking of new
Well,
ones?
because then if we only bring new ones to then look at what the old ones were doing, you know, we love committees, so we could committee things.
Use of
I
subcommittees
mean
is
that in, like, a good way,
definitely,
you guys, I'm
use of
sorry, like,
subcommittees is definitely a
don't- I-
solution that
yeah.
we've been,
And subcommittees
Yeah,
would still, you'd still gather and the subcommittees would sort of report to this group?
yes.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
because they can work quicker, and then, again, sometimes the reason why it feels like we can't do anything in here is because
we
this is
don't
who we
have
have at the table.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we need
okay.
someone else, and they
That
can
could,
come
yeah,
in.
that could potentially be, because then they could work on potentially gathering data to then present on whether, like, pilot programs and stuff like that. That would be a good working solution.
And would you have those subcommittees report back prior to even letter exchange?
I would.
Prior to you
Well,
having your
within
IBBs.
reason, within
Yeah.
what they could do, but that would be ideal.
So instead of just like arbitrarily limiting the number of things you bring forward, you could use subcommittees to report back, then decide.
Uh-huh.
Other ideas?
So,
Maybe to memorialize a process, a frequency, a cadence of meetings with the
Yeah.
association and district leadership outside of IBB, outside of
Which is
negotiations.
different
So,
than
like,
the superintendent meeting?
I was gonna say within the superintendent meetings, because my only thing with that is that, within those meetings, language is not able to be changed.
Right.
Unless
That's
you
the
had an article
only-
in your contract that said
Right.
upon mutual agreement.
Yeah, That's the only caveat for those.
I'm not making eye contact with
You're
Rachel.
okay.
She probably hates that idea. Or not, I don't know what.
I'm just saying, yeah, I mean,
I've just seen that language before, that the parties can open.
just
with
openly.
Mutual agree, not the whole contract, but, okay, so normalize a number of meetings with the NEA and leadership and district leadership. To be able to bring, that addresses some of the interests up there, being able to bring things forward, to be able to do check-ins, avoid time pressures.
So what, Amber and I talked about this before the start of this negotiation session. Just scheduling a number, like we prioritize our issues, however many are brought, we schedule meetings. And if we get to May and issues aren't discussed, then they're saved for next year. The only thing I don't like about that is it could be awkward, right? Like, we could feel like we're,
Would you repeat that idea?
Just not
Yeah.
making progress.
no, what's the word, filibustering, right?
Oh.
Like, I'm just talking to talk, so we never get to this issue, or
do
we're
love a
moving
good
through
Well, I
months.
didn't hear what
That
the
would be my
possible solution
concern.
was. What was it?
Just that we set a number of meetings and
I do
and we
love a good
just
filibuster.
don't, go beyond that number, so that if all the issue statements aren't addressed, we just have a set number of meetings and we don't add on meetings.
I think there is a district that does something like anything that doesn't get done by blank gets carried over. It doesn't go away. It means that issue statement will be dealt with
I
next
just
time.
see a whole list
I'm
of things
still, I'm
continuing.
just
That's a group of
hesitant,
meetings
and I
every
don't,
year. That doesn't
I would
really meet
hope
your interest.
in my
saying no, I'm
trusting
just saying-
personality that it wouldn't happen. I would just fear again that filibuster comment.
Yeah.
Well, and it puts time pressure on.
It does.
does.
It
But-
creates some problems that you don't currently have.
And I mean, to some extent, you know, we are sort of limited in how many meetings we can have, because we've just seen how difficult it was to schedule 2 a month, you know, for the spring semester, or for February through May. So we kind of have a limited ability, but we have in past years, and what has added to the spring is the busiest time for pretty much
Yes.
anyone
Yeah.
in education, but it certainly is for administration. It's like, I feel like double in the spring than I do in the fall. So in past years where we have like added a bunch of meetings and half-day meetings because we haven't gotten through stuff, that has really impacted my work-life balance when we're in April and May adding multiple meetings.
I was going to say also, if we have a commitment that we do year after year, maybe we just put that into the contract and consider that instead of us having it every year, like the Super Bowl thing and like the paperwork days.
And did you say a commitment that you what? I missed what the beginning of what you said. Have
I
a
said
commitment that you-
instead of like when we have our commitments or like our paperwork days and stuff like that, instead of carrying that over every year, we could just put that in the contract instead of having to
language
discuss those every single year repeatedly.
So
So
like
if
if
we've
it's a
had it,
consistent
Yes.
collective commitment, we could look at putting verbiage in.
yes, thank you.
Under a certain topic?
There's issues we
Well,
have to
it would-
talk about every year
Agreed.
because they are annual issues. I think that's what we call them, annual
Yes.
issues.
What are those?
And there's budget, like, tied
gonna
to
say,
some of them, like the paperwork
Budget,
days.
yeah, we talk about paperwork days,
Super Bowl,
Uh-huh.
$1,000.
Yep. Well, and like the, I can't think
That's
of words
another
right
one.
now. The early resignation, what
Oh,
is
the
that?
Incentive.
Yeah, incentive, it's sunsetting this year, so we would need, I mean, just little, I guess that's little things, but.
I think as a solution that we should have as a solution that we add as a joint issue, the annual issues.
Okay. That way we don't have to.
Add
just
as a
bring
joint
them.
issue, the annual issues, and talk about.
That would make it look
which
smaller,
ones have
too.
existed forever, which ones were too nervous, but if there's any that we can
And you add those to
I like that.
permanentize them in the bargaining agreement or
In
permanent?
the, it would be a
Within-
P&A change.
Yeah.
So add as a joint issue, the annual issues of budget, paperwork days, Super Bowl, and then sunsetting issues. And there may be others, you'd have to think that through.
Yep. I actually listed them one year because we forgot about them. And
Yep.
Jill and I just were like, why don't we just continue them? And we just agreed, and that was a complete violation of the Negotiations Act because it didn't happen at the table, but we had not done it, so.
But if you did a joint, if you agreed to it, I guess you're not in violation.
Well, yeah, I mean.
Right, okay.
Well,
It's not
and
an
if
issue
you're
with
the
it
ones that
going
we have to
forward.
talk
It's
about
not an
anyway,
issue,
they might
yeah.
as well be a joint issue
Yeah.
because then that's one less thing that we have to worry about both bringing to the table, so.
Agreed.
Okay, gotcha. But would you carry them over as is, or would you talk about them outside of a bargaining?
Yeah.
Which?
Oh, no, we would potentially make them so that they don't have to be renewed every year in the PNA. I think that's what we're talking about. Not make them, I mean, if they're in the PNA, they have to be negotiated. We can't negotiate outside the process.
Okay.
I would add an interest, because this is really where I think I'm getting, is both sides have a pre-understanding of what commitment they're giving. I think maybe that's where the concern comes from, is starting the process and not understanding or having at least some definition on the commitment that the team members are giving. So having some definition that by serving on the team, this is what you're committing to do in general. It doesn't have to be exact number of hours or anything like that.
Is this a solution or is this an interest?
It's an interest, an interest in, knowing what you're committing to. So I'm sure, just as you have to seek out reps, we have to seek out reps. And it would be really nice not to be like, if this gets ugly, you're here for a week in the summer, negotiate, like just have some, hey, this is our cadence, this is our schedule.
So is it transparent expectations?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what you're signing up
Within
for.
team responsibilities.
And for planning ability too, right? Like we all have to plan our, job and family responsibilities around these meetings. So just from a planning perspective, it'd be nice if we could be like, we know that this is in general what we're looking at.
But can you get that from your current, don't you have that in your current?
We do, but we've added a lot of meetings. And I think if it's on compensation, that's like, well, we have to. Like, if it's on compensation, we have to. But if it's on other things,
So we may have other ideas, or we may have an answer here, maybe not, I don't know. But what is helpful to you all to review? The size of my screen is what it is. These are the ideas that have come up. Sometimes we start process of elimination, just marking things out because they don't solve the problem, they don't meet enough interest, or they harm some interest. By process of elimination, we can take some of these off. It doesn't feel like many of these would come off as possible solutions. Or we could figure out which one of these meets most interest, right? Because some of them do solve the problem to some extent. Which ones solve the problem mostly that are also feasible, manageable?
I would submit we take off traditional bargaining.
I mean, I'm the one who suggested that originally, but I was going to say that too.
It doesn't hit enough of the.
It doesn't solve your problem, really.
It creates more.
And it undermines many of the goals in your joint commitment. Anything else that comes off? I mean, those second one really need to be thought through, and then really see, does it address your issues up there?
I mean,
your interest.
agreeing on a limited number of issues in advance, while I understand the purpose of that, I don't think it doesn't, so it wouldn't check off ensuring we're meeting the needs of the bargaining unit, the ability to refine issues.
Could it check off those things if it was used in conjunction with number 6, after number 6 happened?
Yes, question mark?
So standing alone, number 5 probably harms some interest.
Yeah.
So, but your use of subcommittees was to do just that, wasn't it? Use of subcommittees for report backs was to try to narrow what all you're going to bring based on knowledge you have in advance, right? Or describe the use of subcommittees to me prior to negotiations, report backs.
It was to look at the things that we had done last year so they wouldn't have to to go over into the new year.
Or
and then to be
maybe
able
they
to gather
would.
the data on whether or not those things were
Right.
working.
And I also think as of the PLC subcommittee's been meeting for about a month now. I forget when we started meeting. And I feel like, what?
It's been a couple months.
Yeah, it's been a couple months. I'm losing track of time at this point. And I feel as though because of that and because we didn't wait or feel rushed, I feel really good about coming out of that committee with something.
Yeah.
So having those committees
Sometimes
meet.
those committees are going to be ready for you to bring something to bargaining. Sometimes you're going to know they're not.
Right.
So that is what is going to enable you all to decide if you can limit
Yeah.
to some extent. But I think everybody agrees it can't just be an arbitrary limit on number.
Right.
Right.
I would like to take off the multi-year thing, just because look what happened when we try to do a unilateral contract. I don't think our bargaining unit
I
would
was gonna say,
go
we're
for
gonna have
that.
issues with that as well.
Yeah.
Your bargaining unit wouldn't, if you laid out the other plan to be able to deal with issues in an intensive basis throughout the year, are you saying?
I don't believe so.
I don't think they would.
Personally, I don't believe so.
Just hearing from other districts that have done that, they have not agreed with that, listening to people around here.
For terms and conditions or salary or both?
Yes.
As a question.
Both.
Both,
Yes.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
both. Sorry.
So that's pulling a big trigger to say your members would not do it, even if there was a plan laid out to how you're going to overcome. Your members would have no sympathy for the fact that you're in here every year all the time.
I think our members want us, I think our bargaining unit wants us to be here
I agree.
personally.
I agree with
Again, back to the transparency, and if you're looking at the interest, I do think continuing, as of right now, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
in future years, but I feel like continuing to do what we're doing right now will help with that. We'll get more efficient with our time use and our responsibilities. We're meeting the needs of our bargaining unit and the Board of Education. We're able to check and refine it on the issues. I feel like we're doing better, especially this year with our issues at
near
avoiding
as
pressure to
many.
come up with issues that quote unquote aren't issues, right? We're meeting the Negotiations Act requirement as well. And within the subcommittees right now, we are getting data. I would like, some more time to actually look at things. But as of right now, we are having the subcommittees. We are looking at the data. And I do feel like the people that join the team, because even for the negotiation, we apply to be
Yeah.
here. So we know what we're giving up when it comes to the responsibilities of what we're signing up for. So
Yeah.
I feel like that ticks almost all the boxes, as again, for right
Yeah.
now. So.
Recognize other core responsibilities of individuals. Is there no one else is feeling the pressure that some folks in here are feeling in terms of constant? Every
I'm
year.
not.
I applied to be here,
Personally,
so.
I felt like the association told me what I was getting into.
Yeah.
I knew when I made this commitment that I was truly committing.
Rachel, I want to just put you on the spot.
I would not agree with that.
I'm gonna,
What if-
I carry a lot of responsibility.
I was gonna say, we're gonna
Absolutely.
put you on the spot a little bit.
Absolutely.
What if, I have another potential solution.
Yeah,
So what if we said that at the end of this round, or at the end of all of our rounds, we have an open and honest dialogue, an assessment of where we're at with the terms and conditions as well as finances, and have an open discussion about whether or not we need to meet again in the coming year, or if we could agree to a multi-year. Where
You
it's
would
not,
have
where
that
it's not
dis-
like right now, okay,
When
it's
would you
off the
have the
table,
discussion,
but,
When would
like
you-
what, at that last meeting, after
but
we're
it
done with
doesn't,
finances?
would it not come in conjunction with committee reports?
I think it could, but I think it'd be nice for us to, again, have that conversation about, okay, we're super satisfied with how the P&A reads, we're super satisfied with finances, and if it's not there, it's not there.
Or, again, I feel like it's, because we don't have these time periods in between, or I don't feel like long enough time periods, part of the issue is like, we need some time for the school year to play out, right? And to figure out what is happening, where are we, because I know you guys survey your members, and we gather information too about where are things working and where are they not working. And perhaps it makes sense to do kind of like Amber and I did this year and have some sort of not a negotiations meeting, but like a pre-planning meeting that's not a formal meeting where we sit down and say, what are we looking at this year? Like, we don't have to give notice, right? So that we're not forced to give notice, but sit down and say, hey, look, we are really just reviewing old issues this year. We probably don't need to meet till after spring break, or we want to redo the salary schedule this year. We need to start meeting right now.
So is it same as what Mike is saying, but do it more
it-
like beginning of
do it at the
next year versus
maybe.
end of this
It's
negotiation?
just hard to know until the contract has started going what your issues are. Because that is, that's,
So it would be the end of each bargaining or prior to
Yes.
each bargaining? So that it's not either, so it could be that you're in probably a very real way determining what all's on your plate.
I mean,
in advance.
trying to keep with IBB, like my process that I use is as the semester goes, I keep notes, right? And I'm like, oh gosh, this thing came up or this thing came up, or I look at last year. And then once I get to a point, I'm like, oh, it's December and now this is kind of what we've gathered. And that sort of goes back to I think it is traditional bargaining just to say, well, we're going to push this button and we're going to put pressure here and we're going to push here just because we need to. I'd like it to be an actual issue-driven, problem-driven process.
So are you saying what we've been doing is not an issue-driven process?
No, I mean, I think that it has been because we've had so many years of not doing this process. I think a lot of what we've dealt with has been things that didn't get solved for years and years and years that needed to be dealt with. And I think that's why we're seeing a fewer number of issues this year, is because we've done significant amounts and hours and hours and hours of work.
I think we built up trust too in each other.
But again, I feel like with the multi-year contract, you're gonna lose that. And that is a super important and hard thing to get back once you lose it.
If that's the case, then
I mean,
Yeah.
that's my biggest, like, I can't get past that. I'm so sorry.
no.
How, has Shawnee Mission ever had a multi-year contract?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've only been here 4 years.
Neil knows.
Linda
According
probably knows
to
it
the
too.
audience,
Back
yes.
According to the people sitting behind us.
It was
Linda, you
back in
wanna-
like
We've had a
2010.
two-year, yes.
A two-year?
Back in the, yes, when I taught here, we have.
Yeah, we had one in 2008, 9.
And
And again,
what drove that?
It gets
Jill?
really messy because of compensation, right? Like, do you have enough information?
But if we're
Both-
obviously gonna have to bring that
Right.
up. it's-
Both sides are playing a betting game with compensation, which is sticky and messy.
Well, you
and-
guys don't have the option of, do a 2-year agreement for compensation.
No, I mean.
On here.
We do, but we have a DOL decision that makes that really problematic now.
But I mean,
to
nobody's
try and
put it
do
on an
that.
idea.
Right, so I don't think yeah.
So
It would
I
be
want
crossed off
to,
pretty
based on what you're saying, I want to go back and add an interest. Because I'm hearing you say something that a multi-year contract would not be a go for our membership. That's just like, remember I said in training, like if you say that, it's got to be like no matter how hard we try to educate, no matter how much we show them it makes sense, it wouldn't be a go. So you're addressing a still existing trust issue with membership?
I would say if we went to a multi-year agreement, we would then be in, not that we would automatically lose that trust, but that we could potentially then lose that. And again, it's so hard. It's so hard to build trust between just the working bodies within a district, especially the size. And I mean, I enjoy working here. I like working here. I like the transparency of it. I've worked in districts where there's not that. And it's nice to have it.
So can I say that your interest is maintaining the process we've made
Absolutely.
on trust in our membership?
Absolutely. Well,
Membership's trust
within
in
our
the
bargaining
process.
unit with the board, absolutely. I would.
Yeah, and I would
that.
say, just for clarification, it would be bargaining unit in
Yeah,
the
sorry.
setting rather than
Just the
membership.
members, yeah. Because the bargaining
I'm just
unit is
saying
the people
MBU,
who,
bargaining.
right,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's, yeah.
'Cause
Maintain
they're the ones
progress
who are
you've
gonna
made on
ratify.
trust in the bargaining unit.
Agreed.
And then also, as leaders of your association, you know, you got to keep your long eye on that. How do
Yeah.
we get to where there
Yeah.
isn't a day where we have to react to their trust issues,
Right.
right?
And
And that's
that-
member development education.
Again, it's been.
I understand what,
I know,
I
I'm just
understand, and
saying.
I will tell you that the board understands what you were saying. You know, we
Right.
review our issue statements with the board, and certainly, like, your comments were anticipated and are well-received.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
understand what you're, completely. I think we're just, I think if we are going to have that level of frequency on terms and conditions, there can probably then, there should flow from that, as there has this year, some reasonable defined amount of time that we spend then, if we're gonna meet every single year.
Prior to coming together for the year,
Yes.
so
Like-
that you have filtered together what needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead, guys, I'm going to
long
do
as
it.
it's done
Going once, going
collectively.
twice, I'm marking out multi-year contract for terms and conditions. I'm putting that it may be unacceptable for the NEA bargaining unit. I'm going to say at this time.
Or
It's
just the
going-
bargaining unit in general, because again. it's
But is
not-
it also at this time?
At this time, yes, ma'am.
I mean, to be able to say forever.
I'm not gonna say, I would not say
No,
forever.
I would never say
I would
forever.
absolutely not, no. I would just say at this time, agreed.
because you guys have done amazing work earning trust, and I say you
Yes.
all as a whole
Well,
over the
every-
past 3 or 4 years. So
Everyone in this
it'll only
room
get
has
better.
worked really hard at it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I'm
And
taking
again,
it
I
off.
would say that would, just from a process standpoint, that's not something that you typically pre-agree to anyway, right? Like, I think that that's something that frankly is always on the table as you are finalizing your contract every year. It can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 3.
Duration, you mean?
Under the Negotiations Act, yeah. So, we would, from a process standpoint, I wouldn't say we would pre-agree to that anyway. It would always be dependent on where things got at the end.
So it feels as though what you've got left is some things that could be combined together to just sort of make sure you're super efficient going in every year. That's, use of subcommittee report backs prior to. If you normalize the number of meetings with the NEA leadership and district leadership, that may also reduce the number of issues that come. And then this meet at the end of every bargaining, or Rachel saying prior to every bargaining, to decide together not that you have to make it negotiable, but to say, hey, what are the things we both know need to come forward? What are the things maybe we can figure out now?
Yeah,
And
like, again, in my mind, like, it would be, and maybe we can talk here about, like, for all of us, if we're gonna meet every single year to negotiate terms and conditions, how often do we need to meet? What are we looking at? Or, I don't know, maybe something crazy comes up. Maybe we need to entirely redo something, that the lead negotiators sort of just have this scheduled pre-meeting and say, hey, we don't really need to start till after spring break this year. Or we need to start in January, or we need to get we've done this, like, get a subcommittee together early.
Well, and I think,
And you also
I
have
think
on
that
here,
would
add
be
annual
great.
issues as a joint issue
Be a good
statement.
thing.
So you have that your standing annual issues,
Yes.
you've got.
Right.
So it feels like it's a combination of this stuff. I'm gonna let you guys take the lead on how you think you wanna pull this together to a point where you might have consensus on where to go. This longer duration to bargain and less frequent meetings would be a change from the current document.
But if we're having, I mean, if we're having that collective meeting with Amber and Rachel, and if we're doing that ahead of time, then I do feel like that would cut out some of the time that we're having and some of the issue statements that we go through. So I do feel like it would be getting ahead of what we're doing, I guess, right now. So I'm on board with
Issue
that.
statements, I should know this off the top of my head, under the act are due March.
I have it pulled up.
Sounds right.
March 15th.
Letters.
So
issue
again, what
statements.
the act anticipates is post-spring break, right? You do your issue statements in post-spring break.
Right.
Again, I don't want to generalize, and I don't want to say we're not going to, spend the time, but I do think that it might make sense for both people to meet in December and decide, because really issue statements do have to start the process under the act. We have to do that, and I might not have, again, when I say stability periods, I just mean time to test out what's going on and what's actually happening and generate real problems and not made up ones.
I mean, it's smart to have your stuff happen for long enough to know what's really happening, right? But I also feel like I'm just third-party perspective. I feel like you're probably the only person sitting around this table that's always going to be sitting around this table because of your paid position with the district.
Yep.
And I also feel like when it comes time to do the homework of language, et cetera, you're it falls on you. Are there any solutions around that?
You guys want to add another administrator?
I mean, because I feel like people aren't experiencing it like you're experiencing it necessarily.
Well, and just, I will just tell you where my mindset is like an employment law attorney, and just, thinking about how negotiations work for different industries. It's not common to have 1 year. If you look at other industries, they have 5 year, they have 3 year.
Kansas school districts are the only organizations I deal with that have 1 year contracts. And
I don't
basically
really
because
care
of
about
y'all's
other
budget process.
organizations. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sorry. I get that that's not a normal
Yeah.
thing, but I don't care about them. I care about the.
Well,
Right.
it's
Right.
because.
And this is
Yeah.
the thing, and it's because of, again, building the trust, building the transparency, ensuring that the language that we need in order to have a suitable working environment, I get that it's a lot, and I'm sorry.
Well,
I don't have a
No, but I
good
mean, we
answer
could
for
all
you.
say things like, I'm going to challenge you every time you say yes to a homework assignment. Can anyone else do this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right? We should
I
all
agree.
challenge each other on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are some things we're going to want a lawyer to write. There are some things that you just say, I'll do it.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So,
And I mean, we have raised and recognized work-life balance in here as an issue and as an interest that deserves attention for all employee groups,
Right.
right? I mean, we have said that that's important. And so, Again, I just think, if we're doing 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, what is the appropriate and reasonable amount of time for, working on and negotiating a contract that's gonna have a 1 year time period? Again, just from the high level perspective, any contract, the amount of time you spend negotiating it is going to be impacted by the length of the contract, right? They're
Right.
usually, like, how long are we tied to this, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was
They're
3 and 5 year
proportional.
contracts. When it comes time, everything in the kitchen sink comes
Yes.
forward. Because it's been
Right.
3 to 5 years since they've
That's
been
what I'm getting
negotiating.
at. That's what I'm getting at. You
So-
haven't had enough time for some problem in every single provision to be triggered and need to be addressed and renegotiated.
But with this way, when we do have a problem, it's quickly solved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you want to say, does anything else come off this?
Well, and when it comes to like just homework and writing the joint statements and stuff,
Yeah.
let us know. We got people that can help us do that. We can reach out to
Well, and I
whoever
think
to help just,
it's a-
if that's part of it,
Yeah.
we can work with you to get those done in
Well,
an
and-
appropriate, timely manner.
more so, it's knowing. It's having it on my calendar, not having it, like, I can plan appropriately when I have meetings on my calendar.
Right.
And they stay on my calendar. What's been hard is when we get to April, we still have 6 statements left.
Agreed.
And we're adding a bunch, and now my calendar's already full out to
Right.
July, and, like, that's where it gets hard from a planning perspective.
Okay, what do you all want to do with this in terms of coming to consensus on a TA? What parts of these do we adopt and in what form? Is it something that
have to
changes
do
the joint
that
committee?
right now?
I don't know. Does it
Because
change?
I would argue, I don't feel like we're ready to do that, or not argue, sorry, I would say that we're not ready to do that at this point.
Not ready to agree to hear from subcommittees before bargaining?
No.
We haven't done a TA on that. We've
Right.
done a collective commitment.
Right.
Oh, you've already got that in your collective committee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're
Well,
already
I
hearing
think-
from subcommittees prior to
I think we've
bargaining?
addressed subcommittees because, or we should.
I mean, if you aren't hearing from subcommittees prior to bargaining, you're just not being efficient, I would say. Do people think that you already do that, or you should do that?
We hear from
Next
some committees,
Thursday?
like.
We do
throughout
not
the
have
year, right?
subcommittees addressed in our current agreement, and I think it would be, I would suggest that I would suggest as a solution that we adopt some version of our current collective commitment on this issue and add a section about subcommittees that says that the team will discuss and if mutually agreed upon, use them, but also it could be helpful to make sure that we have it written down, their recommendations are advisory only.
Right.
Because we have had that issue, like, now we just have to take it, we have to take this recommendation and adopt it, and the answer that we've come up with as a team is no.
The days
Right.
you guys hear from committees in this, it eats up your time, and because it's important issues, if any of that you can do prior to, so you have the information, and then the folks that get the presentation from the committees, as if not everyone can condense it for this process.
Well, and there's a lot of us in here who are on.
committees.
I was about to
Right.
say,
Yeah.
most of us
Anyways.
end up serving on those committees.
Well, and then are we talking about doing a
TLC.
TA on this, or are we just are we talking about putting it within?
We haven't
So
gotten
the-
that far.
Oh,
We're
okay.
taking one at a time. I'm
Suggested
taking
was
one at a
that-
time,
No, you're
because I
fine. I
don't
was
think
just
we
making
dumped the
sure I
whole
was-
thing, right?
you're fine. I was
If
just
you
making
guys are
sure.
looking to meet some of your interest on efficiency and respect people's other core responsibilities and be able to, refine and check in and all that, I think you take one of these at a time. I can't just dump all 7 of them without a good reason.
Right.
Right, so I think that you're saying you're not going to agree to limit the number of issues, so that comes off, right? You're not
Yeah.
just going to arbitrarily say, hey, 3 issues, right? So number 5 comes off as a possible solution because it hurts some interest, right? But what's still on here is longer duration to bargain with less frequent meetings. This number 1's off. Use of subcommittees to report back prior to starting, so you're more informed on, do you need to bring the issue statement just to hear from the committee? Right, because, right, and then do you want to normalize a number of meetings with NEA leadership and the district prior to bargaining, but it still doesn't cancel out bargaining? Is there any value in that, or is that the Rachel Amber meeting that had been, that had happened?
Yeah, I'd feel like it'd be that.
Yeah,
I'd be
when
worried
I
about
suggested,
putting-
I was thinking more of the meetings with NEA president.
Which those are already
and
happening.
those-
Right, but
As
just,
of now, given that we are going to have a turnover
Yeah.
in superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have a turnover in super, so is this an opportunity to say in your joint commitment that those meetings will continue? And is it an opportunity in your joint commitment to say that the chair for the NEA and the chair for the district will meet at least once prior to negotiations Do you want to commit to that so that people
I mean,
in the
we've
future
been
do it?
doing
or-
that. Like, we always can, like, hey, we're gonna know, our reps are gonna be on the agenda.
So it doesn't need to be memorialized anywhere?
Well, it's a little, again, it's like a little weird to do now because we're already, like,
Yeah,
if
okay.
we do a collective commitment, it would be applicable to this negotiation session. It wouldn't bind us for what we're
Next
gonna
year,
do for
right.
the next negotiation session.
Okay, so then I'm going to say the use of subcommittees reporting back to negotiations, you're going to decide if you want to,
And I think we could build upon that and, like, because we have had questions come up, can they start before negotiations have started? Can they? And we've agreed that they can, because they're making advisory recommendations only, they're not formally negotiating. But I think it could be helpful to have that memorialized in here so that we all know.
what would that look like, Rachel?
I would add a provision to some version of our current collective commitment that we just reviewed at the outset of this issue that addresses subcommittees and our culture.
Like, would
that
it be
we-
the IBB team shall receive a report from subcommittees prior to exchanging issues?
Well, we'd probably do it when that issue statement comes up, right?
Because that's when we determine what we need
Yes.
subcommittees
So,
for.
Okay.
so when the relevant issue is presented,
Okay, so they're not doing anything different?
yes.
That's how you're doing it now? Okay. So then that doesn't come up as a solution, that's just you're already doing that. Do as current practice.
And that has saved us. I mean, that has,
We've gotten
Right.
good data from those.
Okay, and then this normalize the number of meetings, we're going to say that's already happening, those are the superintendent meetings. How about adding annual issues as a joint issue, and those issues are listed?
I think we
as-
should do that. I think we should
Yeah, I
agree
agree.
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
to add an
That's gonna
issue
save
at
a
the
lot of
end.
time off of our meetings.
So you said you've already done a list of what those are at some point?
Somewhere I have a list of like the things we can't forget to address every year.
This is an issue where we automatically say, Rachel, before next meeting, would you bring that back for us to review? I'm probably the worst at giving you assignments. So, Rachel, bring back list to agree to,
Yeah,
and, next session if possible.
yeah.
And then meeting in advance, that's kind of already happening with Amber and Rachel at this point. You just want to assume that's always going to happen.
I think, I would say for that, like, I think we, as an extension of that, as a possible solution, that we should modify the current collective commitment to not predetermine, like, we are meeting in January twice, in February twice. Like, I don't think we should have, we may not necessarily need to meet a semester every single year if we are bargaining terms and conditions every single year.
Okay.
Don't be so tight with the language.
Yes, don't be so tight with the language and allow flexibility. Because like if we had met and we had sort of compared notes, we could have said, hey, we can start and have our organizational meeting in early February. Or we have a lot of conflicts this year. We probably need to just do one a month. Like we could have sort of looked at that.
Okay. So guys, look at the screen for me, if you will. Number 3, I'm highlighting what you're going to do thumbs on. You're going to thumb that you're going to continue current practice. I have an exception here. Rachel, bring back the list of things that you're going to agree to have a joint statement on.
Yep.
And this normalize the number of meetings happening. Those are already happening at a superintendent level, so I'm not going to highlight them as something new that you're doing. I wrote that it's already happening. Use of subcommittees, do it as current practice. Right, so those are not new things. So the only thing I'm putting that is new, that is in yellow. You want to mark out this longer duration to bargain and less frequent meetings?
Yes.
Okay, because you might want to try the other things first. You can come back and visit this, and you probably will in a couple of years. Come back and visit this document. So number 6 and 7, I'm just hesitant to mark them out because you're doing them. Right, so I just typed already doing, and they're just not highlighted. So what I think I'm going to ask you to do thumbs on is in order to spend the appropriate amount of time and frequency negotiating terms and conditions, you all are going to continue with your current practice, but you're going to create this go-round a list of your annual issues as a joint statement. That's all you're agreeing to do on this issue statement, to close this issue statement, is that right?
And I think revise the collective commitment. I would add as a solution additional components of taking our current collective commitment about the process, not defining exactly the number of meetings per month. So just kind of removing that language that specifically defines it. But then also adding language that memorializes our culture around subcommittees and how we've used them.
So the language everybody looked at that said how many times you meet in the, like,
Yeah.
February, March, April, you would suggest removing that?
Yes, to give flexibility, because, I mean, the board, if the association came forward and said, listen, we have to negotiate this massive term and condition this year, and it's gonna take time, then we would have a heads up, and we could make a reasonable schedule that would fit that in,
Yeah,
right?
and then we're not specifically.
Can you
But like
then say
this year,
unless
if
jointly
we-
agreed to?
Yeah, I think we just add that, I would probably just revise that to be really loose and to say the lead negotiators will confer in December about when the first meeting needs to be scheduled or something like that.
Yeah.
Because again, I do not want to create the impression that it's not worth the time or that we're trying to put, like, define boundaries on it.
Confer,
It's
when do you
just
confer?
December. That's when we will appoint our reps.
About
and-
meeting frequency?
Yes. And I mean, I liked Amber's idea. I think I would really like if it was possible. I just don't think that we just have this like once a month, but I don't think it aligns exactly with IBB where you're trying to see what your issues are. Rather than just kind of like pick things.
Okay, again, I'm just putting your changes in yellow. Continue with current practice, except add language to collective commitment
Yes.
that lead negotiators will confer in December about number of meetings and meeting frequency.
Yes. I think that makes, because like if we had conferred this year and you've been like, hey, I'm not going to give you our issue statement, but I'm telling you like, these are kind of our issues, then we could have probably, and this schedule we have this year, I think is very manageable, right? It is very doable, but we've had years where we've had many, like 4 a month and multiple half days that just.
And I think too, I think naturally there are going to be years we have more. It's going to happen, and there's going to be years like this year where it seems very doable. And hopefully as we work through this CC, that will kind of naturally happen and almost give, especially you, Rachel, a break every other, I don't want to say break, but a little bit less of a workload every other year while still being able to bring issues to the table every single year.
And it's not, I will just tell you from an administrative perspective, it's not an issue, I mean, workload is workload when you're an administrator, right? Like you accept that. It's being out of pocket for a certain amount of time. Like the issues we deal with are very day-to-day and require an immediate response sometimes. And so it's the length of time that you're out of pocket. And then if we get to the end and we're adding a bunch of meetings, it literally sometimes makes it impossible for me to be responsible to my other job duties. So it's not as much amount of work. It's when you're out of pocket that long and that frequency, it makes it challenging.
So I'm going to just confirm one last time, you guys are just agreeing to what's in yellow, continue your current practice, add language to the collective commitment that lead negotiators will confer in December about the number of meetings and the frequency.
Yep.
And you're going to create, Rachel, bring it back if you can, the next meeting, and you guys will finalize it together, a joint issue statement around your annual issues that come up every year. And that's all you're agreeing to change. Everything else is marked out, and I'm leaving 6 and 7 because you're not going to stop doing that. You already use subcommittees, and you already have normalized meetings with leadership.
And if we have a consensus on this, I would go ahead and revise a CC for this year and share it out with the team, because I like when people have the time and space, like, oh, I have 5 minutes, I'll look at that if you have time and want to. So that, it's been reviewed before we come back to our next meeting, so we can then move on as we've agreed to an NEA issue and not spend a bunch of time on this again. So that's sort of something we've done, is I'll send it out as soon as it's done, as you have time and as your brain is free, look at it, make suggestions, and then usually by the time we get back here, it's like ready to go. So if we did that, I could do that outside of the meeting, and it would take me 10 minutes to do a joint. I know I have a list somewhere that I think Jill and I generated of like, these are the things that we have to make sure to hit every year.
Okay, so you can possibly send those back before basically.
I would send it back before. As soon as I have it, I'd share it.
Okay. All right, so guys, you did not formally do thumbs before I close this document and email it to, who am I emailing my notes to this year? I usually do Rachel, Jill, I'm going to do Rachel and Amber.
Yep.
Okay, so before I'm going to close this, it says TA reached today on numbers 3 and 8, which are the highlights. You want to do thumbs?
Are we
on
doing
that?
a TA or a collective commitment?
Collective commitment.
The CC.
TA on changing your collective commitment.
Oh.
TA, we have just used In here, we've just used
Used
that
it
to mean
for
language
language.
changes, and
Okay.
this would not impact the
So
PA
agreement
language.
reached.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Or
Agreement reached.
commitment reached.
Collective.
Commitment reached on 124 to do number 3 and 8. And did I
Language
see thumbs?
matters.
Did you look around for thumbs, guys? I did not. Okay.
Thank you for taking the time. I know that was more than we
Good work.
anticipated, and listening to me talk so much. Sorry.
It's okay.
No worries, man.
So I think with that, we can conclude the meeting, do a short break, and move on to some of our,
Okay.
Fun things?
fun
Okay,
training
by the way,
things that are
was
not
issue statement
negotiations.
number 1. That was Shawnee Mission School District issue statement number 1. Amber and Rachel, I'm sending now. So you've got it, and you can put it in the shared drive.
Do you guys know what issue you want to talk about next? We should make sure we've decided that.
Yeah, do the agenda for next time.
No shenanigans.
And then take a break, maybe? Well, first of all, do you need to gather any information on any of these before next
That's
time?
why we'll need to see what we want to talk about.
Can we take a break first? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
It's 4:13, guys. How about 4:20?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are not adjourning yet.
Nope, we're gonna
We
take
will
a
be
quick
back for 2 minutes.
Good, good, 'cause
Okay, we just have one tail end issue, which is just sort of scheduling out what we want to do next time.
Yeah.
And determining if there's any homework from it.
Okay.
So that's your call.
Okay, we would like to do NEA Shawnee Mission 2. How do we ensure the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of our professional employees?
Okay?
And are they competitive with surrounding districts? I think, like, in our letter, we asked for, like, the amount of leave that people were using. We kind of would like to know if the current incentive is working.
The
So
incentive.
where we did $75,
Oh, gotcha.
the buyback.
the buyback.
Gotcha, yep.
I guess we wouldn't really know that yet, though. But we would know maybe how many people are using days, so we would need to know how many days have been used
Okay. Yep,
to see if people are using less days.
yep.
Can you guys think of anything else we'd need for that? Yeah, I referred to that was in our letter, but that we need that for next time.
If you have an interest that's competitive, do you have some data from other districts?
Yeah, we're going to compile that and
Okay,
bring
cool.
that, right? That's what we plan to do.
How long is the next meeting? 2 hours?
Yes.
If it's 2.5, do you want to say if there's a second one you could start, what would it be?
Would that be yours, since we did an issue?
And by the way, you did finish one today, so congrats.
So I think what we would do, sorry, before we move on, the use of leave, like we would pick a date, so maybe by either first semester or end of January. I guess we could go to the end of January and compare it year over year.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would.
let's do that.
And I think, did we ask for multiple years in the letter? I can't remember.
Okay.
Well, because we would want to compare, right?
Well, yeah, because I think our ultimate goal is to compare year over year.
Whether or not it's doing anything.
I think it's too much to put on, because it'd be more homework for Dr. Schumacher reviewing that late resignation data, but it might be helpful if we have time to just review our past notes and discussion on Shawnee Mission 4, which is the saving for retirement, because we can't do the PLC issue until we have a report back from that subcommittee. We've already did one.
So you're saying after Shawnee Mission 2, looking at Shawney Mission 4? Is that
Yes.
what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and just go
Yeah.
back and review.
Either one, we keep it in time, real
Oh,
time.
you do?
Yeah, so.
Well, I don't know, what is the team, I don't have a preference. It's a heavy one, but it makes sense from an order perspective to address it first, because to address late resignation data and our commitment to like review that and see where we are and, okay, let's just plan on doing that then if we have time, because it would be more helpful to talk about retirement savings near compensation.
Yep.
Agreed.
Okay.
All right, and that'll probably fill your time.
And I think we can conclude. Okay.
Yep.
We are concluding our first negotiation meeting, and we will meet again somewhere in my scribble, February 21st. Yep.
Is that right?
Meet again February 21st. Cool. Thanks, guys.